The video is only 42 seconds long. In the grainy footage, my stepmother is beating 19-year-old me right in our hallway. Halfway through, my father walks in, stops, and looks. Then he quietly turns away, grabs a fireproof lockbox, and walks out of the house. 15 years later, that exact clip just landed in my inbox from an anonymous sender, arriving the very moment she prepares to steal the last thing my mother left me. My name is Phoebe Diaz, and for the last decade of my life, I have built a fortress out of data, predictability, and silence. At 34 years old, I am a senior risk analysis lead at the Atlas Metrics Group, a company housed inside a monolith of glass and steel in the center of Briarwood, Ohio. My office is on the 42nd floor, a space that smells of ozone and recycled air, temperature controlled to a constant 68 degrees. From here, the cars down on the street look like blood cells moving through a vein, mindless and distant. That is how I like things. I like distance. I like the safety of a spreadsheet where every variable can be accounted for and every disaster can be predicted before it happens. I was analyzing a breach report for a mid-size pharmaceutical client when the notification slid onto the bottom right of my primary monitor. It was 4:17 in the afternoon on a Tuesday. The sky outside was a bruised purple, threatening a storm that the weather app said had an 80% chance of breaking before the commute home. The email was from a sender I did not recognize. The address was a garbled string of alphanumeric nonsense, the kind generated by a burner account or a routing bot intended to mask an identity. It should have gone straight to my spam folder. Our internal firewalls are aggressive, designed to catch phishing attempts that could compromise the sensitive corporate data we handle. Yet, somehow, this one had slipped through the net, sitting there in my priority inbox with a blinking urgency that made the hair on my arms stand up. The subject line consisted of 5 words. You were right about her. My fingers hovered over the mouse. My heart, usually a steady metronome, skipped a beat and then slammed against my ribs. There was no name mentioned, but I knew, when you have a history like mine, the pronoun her only ever refers to one person. It had been 15 years since I had spoken that woman's name aloud. 15 years since I had packed a single duffel bag and walked out of the only home I had ever known, leaving behind a father who had become a stranger and a stepmother who wore cruelty like a second skin. I should have deleted it. That was the protocol. Unverified attachments from anonymous sources were digital poison. I tell my junior analysts this every single day. Delete, report, purge. But I did not delete it. I sat there, frozen in the blue light of my screens, feeling the phantom ache of old bruises that had healed over a decade ago. The analyst in me, the part of my brain that hunts for patterns and root causes, woke up. Someone had found me. Someone knew enough about the wreckage of my past to know exactly which 5 words would act as a key to the locked room in my mind. I clicked the email. There was no body text, no threat, no greeting, no explanation. There was only a single hyperlink that led to a secure cloud storage directory. My hand was shaking. I hated that. I hated that after 15 years of rebuilding myself into a woman of steel and logic, a simple email could reduce me to a trembling child. I took a breath, held it for 4 seconds, and released it. I opened a secure sandbox environment on my computer, a quarantined digital space where I could open the link without risking the company network. It was a reflex, a layer of protection, because even when I'm falling apart, I am still a professional. The link opened a folder containing 2 files. The first was a video file. The title was Hallway Cam 004. I stared at the file name. The blood drained from my face, leaving me cold. Hallway, Camera 4. My mother, Elaine, had installed a do-it-yourself security system during the last year of her life. She had been paranoid, the sickness eating away at her mind as much as her body, and she wanted to see who was coming and going. After she died, the cameras remained, blinking red eyes in the corners of the ceiling that I eventually stopped noticing. I assumed they had stopped recording years ago. I assumed no one ever watched the tapes. I put on my noise-canceling headphones, shutting out the hum of the Atlas Metrics server room down the hall. I double-clicked the video file. The media player launched. The timestamp in the corner read October 14th, 2009, 3:42 in the afternoon. I was looking at myself. On the screen, I was 19 years old. I looked thinner then. My posture hunched. My hair pulled back in a messy knot. I was standing in the main hallway of the house in Maple Crest Hills. The wallpaper was that floral damask Marissa had insisted on, the one that cost $60 a roll, which she claimed was elegant, but actually looked like something from a funeral parlor. And there was Marissa. Seeing her face again, even on a grainy screen, felt like taking a physical blow to the solar plexus. She was wearing one of her structured blazers, the cream-colored one she wore to show houses, projecting the image of the successful, empathetic real estate agent. But in the video, the mask was off. There was no audio at first, just the static hiss of the recording, but the violence was silent and screaming. Marissa was shoving me. This was not a parent disciplining a child. I was an adult, and she was attacking me with the feral intensity of a cornered animal. I saw 19-year-old Phoebe stumble back, hitting the wall. I saw Marissa's hand fly out, open-palmed, connecting with the side of my head. My head snapped to the side. I gripped the edge of my desk in the present day, my knuckles turning white. I remembered that hit. I remembered the ringing in my ears that hadn't stopped for 2 days. In the video, I tried to push past her, tried to get to the door, but she grabbed a handful of my shirt and slammed me back against the wainscoting. Her mouth was moving, contorted in a scream I couldn't hear, but I could read the rage in her eyes. She was beating me. It was clumsy and raw and terrifying. Then, at the 20-second mark, the front door at the end of the hallway opened. My breath hitched in my throat. I had never seen this part. In my memory, the memory I had replayed 1,000 times in therapy and in nightmares, I was alone with her. But the camera does not lie. Richard Diaz, my father, stepped into the frame. He was wearing his gray trench coat, his leather briefcase in his right hand. He looked tired. He took 2 steps into the foyer and stopped. The camera angle was perfect. It captured the entire tableau. Me, slumped against the wall, shielding my face, Marissa, hand raised for another blow, her chest heaving, and Richard, standing 10 feet away. He saw it. He saw everything. There was no obstruction, no ambiguity. He looked directly at Marissa, then down at me. I watched his face, searching for horror, for anger, for the protective instinct that is supposed to be hardwired into a parent's DNA. I saw him blink. His expression shifted. It wasn't shock. It was a flinch of inconvenience, a look of calculation. In the video, Marissa froze, realizing he was there. Her hand lowered slowly. She looked at him, panting. My father did not drop his briefcase. He did not rush forward to pull his wife off his daughter. He did not shout. Instead, Richard Diaz pivoted on his heel. He turned his back on me. He walked 3 steps to the console table near the door, the antique mahogany table my mother had loved. Sitting there, amidst a pile of mail, was a small, gray metal box. It was a fireproof document lockbox. I knew that box. We kept spare keys and birth certificates in it. My father picked up the box. He tucked it under his arm, tight against his ribs. He did not look back at me. He did not look at his wife. He simply reached out, opened the front door he had just entered, and walked back out into the cold October afternoon. The door clicked shut. The video continued for another 10 seconds. Marissa looked at the closed door, then back at me, a sneer curling her lip, as if his departure was permission to continue. The footage cut abruptly just as 19-year-old Phoebe slid down the wall to the floor, covering her head with her arms. The screen went black. I sat in my office, the silence ringing louder than any scream. I felt bile rise in my throat, hot and acidic. I spun my chair around and breathed deeply through my nose, fighting the urge to vomit right there on the carpet. It was not the violence that made me sick. I had processed the violence. I had accepted years ago that my stepmother was a monster. I had made my peace with the scars. It was him, For 15 years, I had told myself that my father was weak, that he was a victim of her manipulation, a man who simply didn't see what was happening because he was too busy working to keep the house, too blinded by grief or love to notice his new wife's cruelty. I had told myself he abandoned me by inaction, by ignorance. I was wrong. He had walked in, he had seen me being beaten, and he had made a choice. He didn't choose to save me. He didn't even choose to stop the fight. He chose a box. He chose a metal box containing God knows what, and he walked out the door to save it instead of his own flesh and blood. He left me on the floor so he could smuggle something out of that house. I felt a tear slide down my cheek. Hot and angry, I wiped it away aggressively. This was not sadness. This was a cold, hardening rage. It was the feeling of the last piece of a puzzle snapping into place, revealing a picture so ugly you wanted to burn it. My father wasn't a coward. He was an accomplice. I turned back to the screen. My hand was steady now. The trembling had stopped, replaced by the vibrating hum of adrenaline. The analyst was back in control. I looked at the second file in the directory. It was a PDF document, a scan. The thumbnail showed a legal header, heavy with stamps and signatures. I clicked it. The document loaded slowly, pixel by pixel, revealing the dense legibility of a legal deed or a will. I didn't need to read the fine print to know what I was looking at. I recognized the letterhead of the law firm my parents had used, but it was the name at the top, typed in bold, courier font, that made my vision tunnel. Last Will and Testament of Elaine Diaz, my mother. I scrolled down. The scan was high resolution. I could see the grain of the paper. I could see the date, 3 months before she died, and I could see the signature at the bottom. But something was wrong. My eyes darted to the metadata on the side of the screen. This file had been created yesterday. Someone had scanned this document 24 hours ago and uploaded it to this folder specifically for me to find. The anonymous email, the video from 15 years ago showing my father stealing a lockbox while I was being assaulted, and now, my mother's will. The implication was a sledgehammer. The sender wasn't just showing me the past. They were showing me a crime scene. They were telling me that the reason my father walked out with that box wasn't just to avoid a domestic dispute. It was because the box contained something worth more to him than my safety. And seeing my mother's name on that screen, a ghost summoned from the grave to testify, I realized that my exile was over. I had sworn I would never go back to Maple Crest Hills. I had sworn I would never step foot on that driveway or breathe the air of that poisonous house again. But someone was dragging me back. They were dangling the one thing I couldn't resist, the truth about why my life had been destroyed. I reached for my phone. My fingers moved automatically, dialing a number I hadn't called in years. But before I hit send, I stopped. I looked at the video file one more time. Hallway Cam 004. I grabbed a pen and a notepad. I wrote down the timestamp. I wrote down the file size. I wrote down the details of the lockbox my father had carried. Gray, steel, approximately 12 inches by 8 inches. I wasn't just a daughter anymore. I was a risk analyst, and I had just identified a critical anomaly in the dataset of my life. I closed the browser window, but the image of my father's back turning away from me was burned into my retinas. "Okay," I whispered to the empty office. "You want my attention? You have it." I saved the files to an encrypted drive on my keychain. I stood up, grabbed my coat, and walked out of the office. It was 4:55. I didn't log out. I didn't say goodbye to the receptionist. I walked to the elevator, pressed the button for the lobby, and watched the numbers count down. 41, 40, 39. With every floor that passed, Phoebe Diaz, the corporate analyst, was receding, and Phoebe Diaz, the daughter of Elaine, was surfacing. I was going home, and God help anyone who stood in my way. I sat in my car in the parking garage, the engine idling, the vibration humming through the soles of my shoes. The air conditioner was blasting, but I felt feverish, a dry heat radiating from my chest that had nothing to do with the temperature. On the passenger seat, the encrypted drive sat like a lead weight. I had watched the video 3 times before I left the office. I did not need to watch it a fourth. The image was burned into the back of my eyelids. My father, the lockbox, the door closing. To understand why that specific image felt like a knife twisting in an old wound rather than a new injury, you have to understand the house. You have to understand the castle. That is what my mother and I used to call it. It was a stone colonial in Maple Crest Hills, a neighborhood where the driveways were paved with cobblestones and the lawns were manicured to within an inch of their lives. My parents bought it when I was 4 years old. It was a stretch for them back then, a financial reach that kept my father awake at night. But my mother, Elaine, had been adamant. She wanted stone. She wanted permanence. She wanted a legacy. By the time I was 16, the house was fully paid off. My mother had inherited a modest sum from her own parents, and instead of vacations or luxury cars, she poured every cent into the mortgage. I remember the day she burned the banknote in the fireplace. She held the paper with trembling fingers. The first signs of the sickness were already there, though we ignored them and watched the edges curl into ash. "This house will be yours, Phoebe," she had told me, her voice thick with a certainty that frightened me. "No matter what happens to me, or to your father, or to the world outside, this is your ground. Nobody can move you from here." She died 11 months later, and the castle, which was supposed to be my fortress, became my prison. My father, Richard, was a man who did not know how to be alone. He was a creature of dependency, a man who needed a woman to reflect his own image back to him to feel real. He remarried less than a year after the funeral. Her name was Marissa. Marissa was a real estate agent. That was the first thing Dad told me about her, as if it were a character reference rather than a job title. She was beautiful in a way that felt manufactured, shiny hair that never moved, teeth that were too white, and a laugh that sounded like wind chimes in a gale. On the surface, she was perfect. She brought casseroles. She spoke in a soft, sympathetic voice about grief and healing. She told the neighbors she was stepping in to bring light back into Richard's life. But I saw the way she looked at the house. She did not see a home. She saw square footage. She saw equity. She saw an asset that was being wasted on sentimental clutter. The erasure began slowly. It was subtle. The kind of psychological warfare that is impossible to explain to an outsider without sounding petty. First, it was the curtains. My mother had sewn them herself. Heavy velvet drapes that blocked out the winter chill. Marissa replaced them with sheer, white linen. "To let the light in," she said, smiling that tight porcelain smile. Then it was the furniture. The overstuffed armchair where my mother used to read to me was moved to the garage, replaced by a beige sectional that looked like it belonged in a dentist's waiting room. "We need to modernize, Phoebe," she would say when I protested. "We can't live in a museum. It's not healthy for your father." That was her weapon. Everything was for my father. Every photo of my mother that disappeared from the mantel. Every knick-knack that vanished. Every change was justified as a necessary step for Richard's mental health. If I fought back, I was the one being selfish. I was the one dragging him back into the dark. I remember coming home one afternoon to find the wall in the hallway bare. The gallery of family photos. Pictures of me and Mom at the beach. Mom and Dad at their wedding. Mom holding me as a baby, was gone. The wall had been spackled and painted a neutral gray. "Where are they?" I had asked, my voice rising. "I put them in storage," Marissa had replied, not looking up from her magazine. "Having her face everywhere, it makes your father sad. Phoebe, we have to think about the living." But she didn't put them in storage. Years later, I found out she had sold the silver frames at a consignment shop and thrown the photos in a dumpster behind the strip mall. She erased Elaine Diaz inch by inch, until the only thing left of her in that house was me. By the time I was 19, the house was unrecognizable. It was cold, white, and empty. I was attending the local community college, studying data science, trying to save money by living at home. It was a practical decision, one my mother would have supported, but to Marissa, my presence was an infestation. She began to spin a narrative to my father. I heard them whispering in the kitchen late at night. She painted me as a failure, a leech who was too lazy to launch, a sullen teenager who refused to move on. "She is 19, Richard," she would hiss. "Why is she still here? She stares at me. She makes me feel uncomfortable in my own home." And my father, weak, pliable Richard, would just sigh. "Give her time, Marissa. She is grieving." "It has been 2 years," she would snap back. "This isn't grief. It is entitlement." The tension in the house grew so thick you could taste it. It tasted like metal. I started spending more time in the library, in my car, anywhere but there. But I always came back. I came back because of my mother's voice in my head. "This house will be yours." I felt that if I left, if I surrendered the ground, I would be betraying her. That brings me to October 14th, 2009, the day of the video. I had come home early from a lecture because I had a migraine. The house was silent, or so I thought. I walked into the kitchen to get a glass of water, and there was Marissa. She wasn't at work. She was sitting at the kitchen island, a stack of documents spread out before her. She jumped when she saw me, her hand instinctively covering the papers. That was my first clue. The analyst in me, even back then, noted the anomaly. Marissa was never startled. Marissa was always in control. "Phoebe," she said, her voice dropping into that fake sweetness that made my skin crawl. "I didn't expect you." "I live here," I said, opening the cabinet. She watched me for a moment, then tapped a manicured fingernail on the granite countertop. "Actually, since you are here, we need to handle some housekeeping. Your father and I have been discussing the mortgage." I paused, the glass halfway to my mouth. "What mortgage?" "The house is paid off." "Well, technically," she said, waving a hand dismissively. "But the paperwork is old. The title is messy because of Elaine. We want to refinance, pull some equity out to do some necessary repairs. The roof needs work. The HVAC is ancient. To do that, we need to clean up the deed." She slid a document toward me across the island. It was thick, stapled, and full of legal jargon. "We just need you to sign this. It is a quitclaim. It just removes your name from any potential claim on the title, so the bank can process the loan under your father's name. Purely procedural. Once the loan is approved, we add you back to the trust." I looked at the paper. I looked at her. "I am not signing that," I said. Her smile faltered. "Don't be difficult. Phoebe, it is for the house. It is for your father." "Mom paid off this house so we wouldn't have a mortgage," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "She wouldn't want you taking out loans against it." "Your mother is dead," Marissa said. The sweetness was gone now. Her face was hard, angular. "She doesn't have an opinion, and frankly, neither do you. You contribute nothing to this household. You eat our food, you use our electricity, and you sulk. The least you can do is sign a piece of paper so we can maintain the roof over your head." "No," I said. "I am not signing away my rights." I turned to walk away. I wanted to get to my room, lock the door, and call my father. I wanted to tell him what she was trying to do. I didn't make it to my room. She caught me in the hallway from the video. "You ungrateful little brat," she screamed, grabbing my arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong, her nails digging into my bicep. She spun me around. "After everything I have done for you, I have tried to be a mother to you." "You are not my mother," I shouted back, wrenching my arm free. "You are just a gold digger who wants to sell this place the second Dad is senile." That was the trigger. She shoved me, hard. I stumbled back, my shoulder hitting the wall. The shock of it stunned me. Marissa was verbal. She was manipulative, but she had never been physical. "How dare you?" she hissed, stalking toward me. "This is my house. Mine. Do you understand? Your mother's sentimental wishes don't pay the property tax. I do." She slapped me. It was an open-palmed strike that connected with my ear, sending a burst of white light across my vision. I raised my hands to defend myself, but I was small, and I was terrified. I wasn't fighting a peer. I was fighting the adult who was supposed to be in charge. "Get out!" she screamed, grabbing my shirt, shaking me. "If you won't help this family, then get the hell out." This was the moment. The 42 seconds. I was crying. I was begging her to stop. I was pinned against the wainscoting, shielding my head as she rained blows down on my shoulders and arms. I felt utterly, completely alone. I thought that if my father were here, he would stop this. I thought that if he knew, he would save me. And that is where my memory of that day always ended. I remembered breaking free. I remembered running up the stairs, locking my door, and throwing clothes into a duffel bag with shaking hands. I remembered climbing out the window because I was too scared to go back down the hallway. I remembered sitting in my car, calling my father's cell phone over and over, leaving sobbing voicemails that he never returned. I never saw him that day, or so I thought. Sitting in my car 15 years later, the silence of the parking garage pressing in on me, the truth of the video rewrote my entire history. He had been there. While I was screaming, while I was cowering against the wall. Richard Diaz had walked through the front door. He had stood there. He had watched his wife assault his daughter. And he hadn't frozen. He hadn't been paralyzed by shock. The video showed a man moving with purpose. He didn't look at me with concern. He looked at me as a distraction. As long as Marissa was busy beating me, she wasn't looking at him. She wasn't looking at the console table. He took the lockbox. I closed my eyes and pictured the box. It was a standard Sentry safe, dark gray, fireproof. We kept passports in there, birth certificates, the deed to the house. Why did he take it? If he was leaving the house to escape the violence, why take the box and not his daughter? If he was kicking me out, why sneak the box out? A cold realization settled in my gut. Heavier than the grief, sharper than the anger. My father didn't just fail to protect me. He used my suffering as a smokescreen. He used the noise of my beating to cover the sound of his theft. He was hiding something. Something in that box was so dangerous, so incriminating, or so valuable that securing it was more important than the physical safety of his only child. For 15 years, I had hated him for his weakness. I had hated him for choosing her over me. But I had been wrong. He hadn't chosen her. He hadn't chosen me. He had chosen himself. He had chosen the secret in that box. I opened my eyes. The tears were gone. My reflection in the rearview mirror looked back at me. Harder, older, colder. I reached for my phone again. This time, I didn't hesitate. I pulled up the contact for the law firm listed on the header of the PDF file, the scanned will I had found in the folder. Brenton and Pike. The number was disconnected. I swore softly. Of course it was. Nothing was going to be easy. I looked at the file again. The scanned will. Last will and testament of Elaine Diaz. The date was 3 months before she died. The signature. It looked too smooth. My mother had tremors in her final months. Her handwriting had become jagged, spidery, but the signature on this document was flowing, confident. And the header, Hallway Cam 004. Someone had saved that video. Someone had kept it for 15 years. And now, just as the statute of limitations on my pain was expiring, they had handed me a weapon. I put the car in reverse. I wasn't going back to my apartment. I was going to Briarwood's public records office. I needed to see the deed. I needed to see who owned the castle now. But deep down, I knew. I knew why the anonymous source had sent the video now. Marissa was making a move. She was trying to finish what she started that day in the hallway. She was trying to erase the last trace of Elaine Diaz. "You want to fight, Marissa?" I whispered to the empty car. "You have got one." I drove out of the garage and into the rain, heading toward the one place I swore I would never go. Pulled by the gravity of a 42-second clip and a gray metal box that held the answer to everything. The girl who ran away was gone. The woman driving the car was coming back to burn the whole thing down to find the truth. The glow of my dual monitors was the only light in my apartment. I had left the office hours ago, but I had brought the work home with me. Not the corporate risk assessments for Atlas metrics, but a risk assessment of my own life. I sat in my ergonomic chair, a mug of cold coffee forgotten near my mousepad, and stared at the second file from the anonymous folder. It was a PDF titled Amended Testament Ed Final. My eyes felt gritty, but my mind was sharpening into a cold, diamond-hard focus. The initial wave of nausea from the video had receded, replaced by the mechanical precision that made me good at my job. I wasn't a scared 19-year-old girl anymore. I was a professional who spent her days hunting for anomalies in massive datasets, and this document was full of them. The document purported to be an amendment to my mother's will, dated 4 months before her death. The legalese was dense, standard boilerplate for estate planning, but the core clause was simple and devastating. It revoked all previous bequests, specifically the clause leaving the house in Maple Crest Hills to me upon my 21st birthday, and instead transferred all assets, real and personal, to Richard Diaz, giving him sole and absolute discretion to dispose of the property as he saw fit. I zoomed in on the signature line at the bottom of page 4. Elaine Marie Diaz. The ink was black, the loops of the E and the D sweeping and elegant. It was a beautiful signature. It was steady. It was confident. It was a lie. I closed my eyes for a second, summoning the memory of my mother in those final months. The degenerative nerve condition had eaten away at her motor control with terrifying speed. By the time this document was allegedly signed, she could barely hold a spoon. We had to use a straw for her water. Her hands shook with a violent, ceaseless tremor that frustrated her to tears. There was absolutely no way, 0% chance, that Elaine Diaz had signed this document with such fluidity. I opened a separate window and pulled up an old birthday card she had written to me 2 years before she died, when she was still relatively healthy. I scanned it and overlaid the signatures. They were identical, not just similar, identical. In the world of handwriting analysis, a perfect match is the hallmark of a forgery. No person signs their name exactly the same way twice. There are always microscopic variations in pressure, angle, and spacing. But when I adjusted the opacity of the will's signature and placed it over the birthday card, they lined up with mathematical perfection. Someone had lifted her signature from an old document, scanned it, and digitally pasted it onto this new will. I looked at the metadata of the PDF again. It wasn't a scan of a physical paper document. It was a print-to-PDF file created from a word processor, with the signature image embedded. It was a clumsy, arrogant forgery made by someone who didn't think anyone would ever look this close. I checked the email again. Below the link, in white text that was almost invisible against the pale background, was a second note I had missed earlier. She forged more than your memories. Check the dates. Check the lockbox. The lockbox. The gray metal box my father had carried out of the house like a thief in his own home. I picked up my phone. I needed to verify the source. The header of the legal document bore the logo of Brenton and Pike, a law firm that had been prominent in Briarwood during my childhood. I searched for their current contact information. The search results were a graveyard. Brenton and Pike was listed as permanently closed. I dug deeper, accessing the State Bar Association's archives. The firm had dissolved 8 years ago. The reason listed was vague, administrative dissolution. But a few digging clicks into the local legal gossip blogs from that year painted a clearer picture. There were allegations of mishandling client funds, ethical violations, and a quiet implosion to avoid a public scandal. I found a number for a third-party records custodian listed for the defunct firm. It was a long shot, but I dialed. It rang 4 times before a tired female voice answered. Archive services. Please hold. I waited for 6 minutes, listening to tinny elevator music. When she came back, I kept my voice flat and professional. My name is Phoebe Diaz. I am inquiring about a testamentary document prepared by Brenton and Pike in 2009 regarding the estate of Elaine Diaz. There was the sound of typing, then a pause. I'm sorry, ma'am. We only hold closed physical files for 7 years. Anything from 2009 would have been purged or returned to the executor long ago. We have no digital records for that entity. Is there anyone from the firm I can speak to? A partner? Mr. Brenton is deceased, the woman said, her voice devoid of sympathy. And Mr. Pike was disbarred. I don't have contact information for him. She hung up before I could ask another question. I stared at the phone. Dead end. But the dead end confirmed my suspicion. A reputable firm hadn't handled this. A corrupt, dying firm had stamped a forgery to give it the veneer of legitimacy. Marissa had found a lawyer desperate enough or unethical enough to paper over her theft. My phone buzzed in my hand, making me jump. It wasn't the archives calling back. The caller ID said Ethan Diaz. I stared at the name, my half-brother. I hadn't spoken to him since the day I left. He was 4 years old then, a toddler who cried when the shouting started. I didn't know the 20-year-old man who owned this number. I let it go to voicemail. I wasn't ready to hear his voice. I wasn't ready to let the family drama bleed into my investigation. But as soon as the notification popped up indicating a new message, I pressed play. Hey, Phoebe? The voice was young, hesitant, and sounded terrified. It's Ethan. I don't know if you still have this number. Mom said you changed it, but I found it in Dad's old address book. There was a pause, a shaky intake of breath. Listen, Dad had a stroke. He's at the Cedar Ridge Rehab Center. It's bad. Phoebe, he can't really talk. And, look, I wouldn't call, but Mom is freaking out. The house is in trouble. The bank is being totally unfair. They're threatening foreclosure. And Mom says if we don't fix it, they're going to kick Dad out on the street when he gets home. She said maybe you could talk to her, just to help save Dad's house. Please, call me back. The message ended. I sat there, the silence of my apartment feeling heavy and suffocating. Save Dad's house. I laughed, a harsh, dry sound that scraped my throat. It wasn't Dad's house. It was never Dad's house. It was my mother's house. It was my house, and it was paid for. If the bank was threatening foreclosure, that meant there was a mortgage. And if there was a mortgage on a paid-off house, that meant Marissa had taken out loans, huge loans. She had drained the equity, turning the stone walls of my mother's legacy into cash, and now the money was gone. The pieces were falling into place with the terrifying logic of a controlled demolition. The forged will gave Richard the rights. Marissa controlled Richard. Marissa leveraged the house. Marissa spent the money. And now that the well was dry and Richard was incapacitated, the house of cards was collapsing. I needed a lawyer, not a corporate suit, but a shark. I opened my email client and composed a new message to Camilla Ortiz. Camilla and I had been roommates in college for 1 semester before she transferred to pre-law. But we had stayed friends. She was currently a civil litigation attorney who specialized in property disputes and fraud. She was cynical, brilliant, and possessed a sense of humor that was drier than the Sahara. I attached the video, I attached the forged will, I attached the timeline I had just sketched out on my notepad. My message was short. I think my stepmother stole my inheritance, forged a will, and is about to lose my mother's house. Also, my father might be an accomplice. Call me. I hit send. I stood up and paced the length of my living room. My heart was hammering against my ribs, but my head was clear. The anger I felt wasn't the hot, reactive fury of the girl in the hallway. It was a cold, calculating rage. It was an engine. My phone rang 3 minutes later. Okay. Camilla's voice came through the speakerphone, crisp and immediate. First of all, holy hell, I just watched the video. Are you okay? I'm fine, I said, and I meant it. I'm past the feelings. Cam, I want the facts. Facts, Camilla said, the sound of papers rustling in the background. Fact 1. If that video is authenticated, it proves a pattern of abuse. Fact 2. That signature on the will looks suspect even to my naked eye. If we get a forensic document examiner, they will tear it apart. The pixelation alone suggests a digital overlay. The firm is gone, I said. Brenton and Pike. Of course they are, Camilla scoffed. They were a foreclosure mill before they went under, shady as they come. But here's the kicker. Phoebe, if the will is a forgery, then the transfer of the house to your father is void. If the transfer is void, Then the mortgage Marissa took out is invalid because your father didn't have the clear title to pledge as collateral. This is fraud. Massive, multi-layered fraud. Ethan says the bank is foreclosing, I said. They will try, Camilla said. But we can stop them. We can file an emergency injunction to halt the foreclosure based on a clouded title. We can claim the deed was obtained through fraud. But Phoebe, we need more than just a digital scan and a video. We need the original. The original will? The original everything, Camilla said. We need to prove that the amended will is fake. Usually, forgers destroy the original, but if they were smart, or arrogant, they kept it, or they kept the records showing the timeline. The lockbox, I whispered. What? In the video, I said. My father takes a lockbox. The anonymous email told me to check the lockbox. I think the original will is in there. I think the proof of the forgery is in there. My father didn't destroy it. He hid it. Okay, Camilla said, her voice dropping lower. Serious now. If that box still exists, it is the smoking gun. But we can't just ask for it. If Marissa knows you know, she will melt that thing down or throw it in the river. She doesn't know I know, I said. She thinks I'm the estranged daughter who ran away. And Ethan just gave you an invitation, Camilla pointed out. He wants you to come save the day. I stopped pacing. I looked out the window at the city lights of Briarwood. I hated deception. My entire career was built on transparency and truth. But to get to the truth, I was going to have to lie. I'm going back, I said. Phoebe, wait, Camilla warned. You need to be careful. You are walking into a lion's den. If you go there, you are not Phoebe the victim. You are Phoebe the concerned daughter. You are there to help. You need to play the part. You need to be meek. You need to let Marissa think she still has the power. I can do that, I said. I'll go to the house. I'll tell her I want to help with the bank. I'll get inside. And find that box, Camilla added. If it's in the house, you find it. Do not open it there. Do not confront her. You secure the asset and you get out. Once we have the box, we drop the hammer. But until then, you are a ghost. A Trojan horse, I corrected. Exactly, Camilla said. I'll start drafting the paperwork for the injunction. I'll have a motion for a temporary restraining order ready to go the second you give me the signal. But Phoebe? Don't let her bait you. That woman is dangerous. I know, I said. I learned that the hard way. I hung up the phone. I went to my bedroom closet and pulled out a suitcase. I didn't pack my business suits. I packed jeans. I packed soft sweaters. I packed clothes that made me look younger, less threatening. I pulled my hair back into a loose ponytail. I looked in the mirror. I practiced softening my eyes. I practiced the look of a worried, submissive daughter. It was a mask. Underneath, I was cold steel. I grabbed the encrypted drive with the video and the forgery and tucked it into the hidden lining of my purse. Check the lockbox, I whispered to myself. I was going back to Maplecrest Hills. I was going back to the castle. But this time, I wasn't the princess in the tower. I was the siege engine at the gate, and I wasn't leaving without the truth. The drive back to Maplecrest Hills felt less like a homecoming and more like a descent. I steered my car off the highway and onto the winding, tree-lined avenues that defined the suburb of my childhood, 15 years ago. These streets had seemed massive to me, a labyrinth of wealth and security where nothing bad could ever happen. Now, through the windshield of my adult life, they looked small. The lawns were too green, the fences too white, the silence too curated. It looked like a movie set built to conceal a rot that was spreading just beneath the foundation. I turned onto our street, my street, and the nostalgia I expected was replaced by a cold, clinical observation. The neighborhood was exactly as I remembered, manicured and pristine, except for one house. The castle. My mother's stone fortress looked like a dying animal. The ivy that used to crawl elegantly up the north wall had turned brown and brittle, choking the limestone, the front porch. Once the pride of the block with its gleaming railing, was dull and peeling, but it was the front door that made my stomach tighten. Taped awkwardly to the dark wood, fluttering in the slight breeze, was a bright orange piece of paper, a foreclosure notice. It was a scarlet letter, a public declaration of failure in a neighborhood that worshipped success. I parked the car. My hands were steady, but my heart was beating a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. I didn't look like the girl who had fled this driveway in a beat-up Honda Civic with tears streaming down her face. I looked like a stranger. I looked like danger. I walked up the path. The flagstones were uneven, pushed up by roots that hadn't been tended to in years. I reached the door and pressed the bell. I didn't knock. Knocking was for family. The door swung open almost immediately, as if she had been standing on the other side, waiting. "Phoebe!" Marissa stood there. She was older, the lines around her eyes deeper, her neck slightly looser, but the veneer was the same. She was wearing a cashmere cardigan that cost more than my first car, draped over shoulders that were tense with manufactured delight. Before I could speak, she lunged forward. It was a performance. She threw her arms around me, pulling me into a cloud of floral perfume and hairspray. Her body felt rigid against mine, hard and unyielding. "Oh my God, look at you," she gushed, pulling back but keeping her hands on my shoulders, trapping me. "You look wonderful, so professional. Come in, come in. I can't believe you're actually here. It has been too long, sweetheart." Sweetheart. The word tasted like ash in the air between us. She spoke as if the last 15 years were a minor scheduling conflict, as if she hadn't beaten me in this very hallway and driven me out into the night. I stepped inside. If the outside was neglected, the inside was a chaotic shrine to Marissa's anxiety. The elegant minimalism my mother had curated was gone, buried under layers of gaudy, frantic decoration. The walls were painted a suffocating shade of beige. Every surface was covered in porcelain figurines, fake silk flowers, and gold-leafed frames. It smelled of lemon furniture polish and antiseptic, a sharp, chemical mask trying to cover an underlying scent of stale air and sickness. "It is a bit of a mess, I know," Marissa said, waving a hand vaguely. "With your father's condition, it is just so hard to keep up with everything, and the maid service, well, we had to let them go, temporarily." She led me into the living room. The furniture was oversized and leather, crowded together in a way that made the room feel claustrophobic. And there, in the center of it all, was Richard. My father was sitting in a motorized wheelchair. He looked small. That was the first thing that struck me. Richard Diaz had been a tall, imposing man, a man who filled a room with his silence. Now, he was withered. The stroke had taken the right side of his body. His arm was curled inward against his chest, his hand a claw. His face was slack on one side, pulling his mouth into a permanent, lopsided frown. But his eyes were alive. He looked up as I entered. His good hand gripped the armrest of his chair with white-knuckled force. He stared at me, and for a long moment, the room was absolutely silent. I searched his gaze for something I could recognize. I wanted to see regret. I wanted to see love, but what I saw was a terrifying mixture of emotions I could not parse. Was it guilt? Was it fear? Or was it a desperate, calculating assessment of what I knew? "Look who is here. Richard," Marissa cooed, walking over and placing a hand on his shoulder. Her fingers dug in slightly, a subtle claim of ownership. "It is Phoebe. She came to help us." "Hi, Dad," I said. My voice was steady, devoid of the tremble I felt inside. He opened his mouth. A rasping sound came out, a struggle for air and articulation. "Foy! B!" "He has good days and bad days," Marissa interrupted quickly, stepping between us. "Today is a tired day, but he is so happy you are here. We both are." She gestured for me to sit on the leather sofa. I sat on the edge, my back straight, keeping distance between myself and the upholstery. Marissa perched on the ottoman, leaning forward, her face arranging itself into a mask of tragic nobility. "It has been a nightmare. Phoebe," she began, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "The medical bills are criminal, absolute robbery. The insurance company fights us on every single claim. And the bank? The bank is evil. They know Richard is sick. They know we are good people, but they don't care. They just want to take everything. I watched her performance with a cold detachment. She was good. She used her hands to emphasize her plight, touching her chest, wiping a non-existent tear from the corner of her eye. "We tried to reach out to you," she continued, looking at me with wide, pleading eyes, "but we didn't want to burden you. I know you have your own life now. You made that clear when you left." I felt a spike of adrenaline when I left, as if it had been my choice, as if she hadn't assaulted me. "I'm here now," I said, keeping my face neutral. "Ethan said there were paperwork issues. Something about the title?" Marissa stiffened slightly. "It is just technicalities. The bank is claiming the refinancing was done improperly. They are trying to find loopholes to call the loan due. It is ridiculous. Richard had full authority. We just need a little bridge loan to catch up on the arrears, and then we can sue them for predatory lending. If you could just help us with the deposit. Phoebe, we could save the house. It is what your mother would have wanted, for the family to be together." I almost laughed. The audacity was breathtaking. She was invoking the name of the woman she had erased from this house to manipulate the daughter she had abused. "I need to understand the situation before I can commit to anything," I said. "I need to see the loan documents, the deed, everything." "Of course," Marissa said, though her smile didn't reach her eyes. "I have a box of papers in the office. I can get them later." "I'd like to see the office," I said. "It is a mess," she said quickly. "Richard is sleeping in there sometimes. It is better if we just talk here." I nodded slowly, pretending to accept her boundary. My eyes drifted around the room, scanning. I was looking for ghosts. The antique console table that used to stand in the hallway, the one where the lockbox had sat, was gone. In its place was a cheap particle board shoe rack. I looked up at the corners of the ceiling. The old, bulky motion sensors my mother had installed were gone. In their place were sleek, modern blink cameras, their small blue lights glowing. Marissa was watching me watch the room. "We updated the security," she said, her voice tight, "after the neighborhood started to change." "It looks very comprehensive," I said. At that moment, a shadow moved in the doorway. Ethan walked in. He looked like a ghost of the father I remembered, tall, dark hair, but with a slump to his shoulders that spoke of a lifetime of walking on eggshells. He wore faded jeans and a t-shirt that was too big for him. He stopped when he saw me, his hands fidgeting in his pockets. "Hi, Phoebe," he said, his voice low. "Hi, Ethan," I said. He looked at Marissa, then at his feet. I'm glad you came. I didn't think you would." "She is family, Ethan," Marissa snapped, her tone changing instantly from victim to commander. "Of course she came. Go get your sister some water. Or tea. Do you want tea, Phoebe?" "Water is fine," I said. Ethan hurried to the kitchen, glad to have a task. It was obvious he was not an ally. Not fully. He was a hostage. He was financially dependent on a sinking ship, terrified of the captain but unable to swim on his own. I turned back to Marissa. It was time to test the waters. Time to see how deep the fear ran. "You know," I said casually, leaning back slightly, "I was thinking about this house a lot on the drive over. I was feeling nostalgic. I actually dug up some old hard drives from when I was a teenager." Marissa froze. Her hand, which had been smoothing her skirt, stopped mid-motion. "Oh," she said. The word was brittle. "Yeah," I continued, keeping my eyes locked on hers. "I found some old home videos. It is amazing what you forget. The little details, conversations, things happening in the background." I let the silence hang there. I saw it. For a fraction of a second, the mask slipped. Her pupils dilated. Her breath hitched. It wasn't just confusion. It was panic. She looked at Richard, then back at me, her mind racing to calculate what exactly I had found. Did I have footage of the fights? Did I have footage of the forgery? "I didn't know you filmed things," she said, her voice tight. "Mom liked to record. I lied smoothly. She liked to keep a record of the truth. Marissa stood up abruptly. I should check on the tea. Ethan is taking forever. She walked out of the room with a stride that was too fast, too rigid. She was rattled. Good. I looked at my father. He was watching me. His head was cocked slightly to the side, his good eye wide. He wasn't looking at me with the confusion of a stroke victim anymore. He was looking at me with recognition. The box, he wheezed. The sound was barely a whisper, but it roared in my ears. I leaned forward, lowering my voice. Where is it, Dad? Where is the lockbox? He tried to lift his good hand, pointing vaguely toward the hallway, toward the back of the house where the study was. But before he could speak again, Marissa swept back into the room, carrying a tray with a glass of water. Here we are, she announced, her smile plastered back on, though it looked like it might crack the enamel of her teeth. Now, let's talk about that bridge loan. I stayed for another 20 minutes. I listened to her lies. I nodded at the appropriate times. I promised to review my finances and call her in the morning. I played the part of the dutiful, successful daughter who was ready to open her checkbook. But when I stood up to leave, I knew I had to plant one last seed. I will call you tomorrow, I said at the door. Marissa hugged me again, but this time I felt the tension in her frame vibrating like a plucked wire. Thank you, Phoebe, she whispered. You are saving us. I am doing what is necessary, I said. I walked down the steps to my car. I opened the door, got in, and started the engine. Then, I paused. Shoot, I said loud enough for anyone watching to guess. My scarf? I turned off the car. I walked back up the path. I didn't ring the bell this time. I tried the handle. It was unlocked. I pushed the door open. Marissa? I forgot my, The hallway was empty. I could hear Marissa's voice coming from the kitchen, high and shrill, yelling at Ethan. Why did you leave her alone with him? What did he say? I didn't announce myself. Instead, I looked to the left, behind the door, to the small recessed alcove where we used to keep the keys. There was a wooden cabinet mounted on the wall. It was new, something generic from IKEA. The door of the cabinet was slightly ajar. I stepped closer, my heart hammering. Through the gap, I could see the rows of hooks, car keys, house keys, and on the bottom row, a single, empty hook. But it wasn't just empty. The wood behind the hook was lighter than the rest of the cabinet. There was a square outline of dust, a ghost image of something that had hung there for a long time and had only recently been removed. It was the outline of a small, flat key, the kind that opens a sentry-safe lockbox. Marissa hadn't just lost the key, she had moved it. Recently. Phoebe? I spun around. Marissa was standing at the end of the hallway, Ethan behind her. Her face was pale, her eyes darting from me to the open key cabinet. I forgot my scarf, I said, pointing to the console table where I had deliberately left it. Right, Marissa said. She walked toward me, placing her body between me and the cabinet. Here it is. She handed me the scarf. Her hand was cold. Goodbye, Marissa, I said. Drive safe, she said. It sounded like a threat. I walked out of the house, the scarf clutched in my hand. I didn't look back until I was in the car. When I drove away, I saw the curtains in the living room twitch. She knew. She knew that I knew. I had the confirmation I needed. The lockbox wasn't gone. It wasn't destroyed. It was still in the house, hidden, and she had moved the key because she was terrified. My father's whisper and the dusty outline proved it. The game had changed. I wasn't just an investor anymore. I was a hunter, and I knew exactly where to look. My apartment had transformed from a living space into a war room. The dining table was buried under layers of printouts, legal pads, and the glow of 3 different monitors. I had stripped off my concerned daughter costume, the soft sweater and jeans, and changed into sweatpants and an oversized hoodie. I wasn't Phoebe Diaz the victim anymore. I was Phoebe Diaz the senior risk analyst, and I was looking for the root cause of the disaster that was my inheritance. I started with the property records. In my line of work, we have a saying, data doesn't have emotions. but it always has a story. I pulled the chain of title for the house in Maple Crest Hills. It was a matter of public record, accessible if you knew which county database to query and how to bypass the clunky government interface. I watched the history of the house scroll down my screen in green text. Purchase, 1994, Richard and Elaine Diaz. Mortgage release, 2008, paid in full. That was the baseline, a clean, unencumbered asset, my mother's fortress. Then came the anomaly. Mortgage deed, August 12, 2010. Lender, Northline Community Bank. Borrower, Richard Diaz. Amount, $450,000. I stared at the number, $450,000. The date was critical. August 2010 was barely 10 months after my mother died. It was less than a year after I had been beaten and kicked out. Richard had wasted no time. I dug deeper into the filing attachments. To secure a mortgage of that size on a property that was jointly owned, the bank would have needed proof that Richard was the sole owner. Elaine was dead, yes, but without a will transferring the property to him specifically, the house should have passed partially to me or been held in a trust. I found the attachment. It was a scanned copy of the amended will, the same forged document I had received in the anonymous email. There it was, the smoking gun. Northline Community Bank had approved a cash-out refinance based on a fraudulent document. They had handed Richard, and by extension, Marissa, nearly $500,000 of equity that legally belonged to me. I picked up my phone and dialed Camila. It was 2:00 in the morning, but I knew she would be up. "Tell me you have something," she said, her voice groggy but alert. "I have the money trail," I said, putting her on speaker as I typed a new query into my spreadsheet. August 2010, Marissa took out a $450,000 mortgage against the house. She used the forged will to clear the title. "That is fraud on a federal level," Camilla said, the fatigue vanishing from her voice. "That is bank fraud. That is wire fraud. If we can prove the will is fake, the entire mortgage is void ab initio. From the beginning, the bank's lien on the house evaporates because Richard never had the legal right to pledge the house as collateral." "We need a timeline," I said. "I am sending you a spreadsheet." We worked for the next hour, building a chronological map of the theft. October 2009. The assault. I leave. Richard takes the lockbox. January 2010. The amended will is allegedly signed, backdated to look like it was from before Elaine died. August 2010. The loan is approved. 2011 to present. A series of smaller home equity lines of credit, slowly bleeding the house dry, likely to fund Marissa's lifestyle and Richard's medical care after his health began to decline. "This is a textbook bleed out," Camilla muttered. "She didn't just steal the house, she hollowed it out from the inside." "But who sent me the files?" I asked. "Who is the whistleblower?" I turned my attention to the video file itself. Hallway Cam 004. I knew that camera angle. My mother had installed that system herself in a fit of paranoia during her final year. It was a closed-circuit system, wired to a DVR recorder in the basement. It wasn't connected to the internet. That meant whoever had this footage didn't hack it remotely. They had to have physical access to the hard drive. I ran a metadata extraction tool on the video file. Most people scrub metadata before leaking documents, but this person had been careless, or perhaps they wanted to be found. The creation date of the file was 15 years ago, but the upload date, the timestamp of when it was moved to the cloud folder, was just 2 weeks ago. I traced the IP address of the uploader. It wasn't coming from Maple Crest Hills. It wasn't coming from a law firm. It was a residential IP address right here in Briarwood. I plugged the IP into a geolocation service. It pinpointed a massive, run-down apartment complex on the south side of the city called The Stacks. It was the kind of place where paralegals and junior clerks lived when they were drowning in student loan debt. I cross-referenced the address with public voter registration records. Unit 4B. Rowan Blake. The name clicked instantly. When I had called the archives for Brenton and Pike, I had looked up their old employee roster on a cached version of their website from 10 years ago. Rowan Blake was listed as a junior legal assistant. I found him, I told Camilla. Rowan Blake, former paralegal at the firm that forged the will. He lives 20 minutes from here. Phoebe, Camilla warned, it is 3 in the morning. Then he should be home, I said. I am going over there. I am coming with you, she said. Pick me up in 10 minutes. If this guy is the source, we need to get him on the record before he gets spooked. The Stacks lived up to its name. It was a block of gray concrete that smelled of damp cardboard and stale cigarette smoke. The rain was still falling, a relentless drizzle that made the streetlights blur. Camilla and I stood in front of door 4B. I could hear the faint sound of a television inside. I knocked. The television went silent. Footsteps approached the door, then stopped. I could feel him looking through the peephole. Rowan? I said loud enough to be heard through the wood. My name is Phoebe Diaz. You sent me an email about my father. There was a long pause, then the sound of a deadbolt sliding back. The door opened a crack, held by a chain. A face appeared in the gap. He was younger than I expected, maybe in his early 30s, but he looked exhausted. Dark circles rimmed his eyes, and his hair was messy, as if he had been running his hands through it. He wore a faded hoodie and looked like a man who hadn't slept well in a decade. You shouldn't be here, he whispered, looking past me into the dark hallway. You sent me the video, I said. You sent me the will. You wanted me to find you. I wanted you to know, he corrected. I didn't want you to come to my house. We need to talk. Rowan, Camilla said, stepping into the light. I am an attorney. If you are the whistleblower, you are legally exposed unless we protect you. Let us in. He hesitated, his eyes darting between us. Then, with a resigned sigh, he closed the door, slid the chain off, and opened it fully. His apartment was small and cluttered with boxes. It looked like the home of a hoarder or someone who was permanently ready to move. I worked at Brenton and Pike for 4 years, Rowan said, sitting on the edge of a worn-out sofa. He didn't offer us a seat. I was 22, just a kid. I scanned documents. I organized files. I didn't ask questions. But you kept copies, I said. I started keeping copies when I realized what they were doing, Rowan said, rubbing his face. Mr. Brenton, he had a gambling problem. He was taking payouts to rush things through, to backdate signatures, to notarize empty rooms. Marissa, I said. Rowan nodded. She was one of his regulars. She came in with that will. I remember it because she was so aggressive. She brought the original will, the real one, and she brought a sample of your mother's signature on a medical form. She told Brenton she needed the house in the husband's name to simplify the estate. She paid him $5,000 in cash. I saw the envelope. And the video? I asked. How do you have the video? Your father, Rowan said. The room went cold. What? I asked. Your father brought in a hard drive, Rowan explained. About a week after the will was forged, he came to the office alone. He looked haunted. He told Brenton he wanted to leave a legacy file in the firm's safe. He said if anything happened to him, the file should go to you. Rowan laughed bitterly. But Brenton didn't care. He threw the drive in a box of junk to be incinerated. He didn't want to hold on to anything that could blow back on him. I fished it out. I don't know why. I felt like someone should keep it. Why send it now? Camilla asked. Why wait 15 years? Because of the foreclosure, Rowan said. I still track the old cases. A way to punish myself. I guess. I saw the notice go up on the Maple Crest house. I realized she was finally going to lose it. And I thought if the daughter knew, maybe she could stop it. I didn't want Marissa to win. Not after what I saw. What you saw on the video, I said. Rowan looked at me. His expression was soft, filled with a pity I didn't want. You only saw the first file, he said. The hallway. I saw my father leave, I said. I saw him take the lockbox. Yeah, Rowan said. But he came back. I froze. What? There is a second video on that drive, Rowan said. I didn't upload it because I thought it might be too much. But if you are here, you need to see it. He walked over to a computer tower on his desk and woke the monitor. He clicked through a folder and opened a file named StudyCam005. I moved closer to the screen. Camilla stood right behind me, her hand on my shoulder. The video was time-stamped October 14th, 2009, 5:20 in the afternoon, roughly 2 hours after he had walked out the front door. The camera was positioned high in the corner of my father's study, a room I wasn't allowed in as a child. The room was dark, lit only by the late afternoon sun slanting through the blinds. The door opened. Richard walked in. He was still wearing his trench coat. He looked wet, as if he had been walking in the rain. He looked exhausted. He was carrying the gray lockbox. He walked to the center of the room and stood there for a long time, just staring at the wall. Then, he moved to the large portrait of a ship that hung behind his desk. He swung the frame aside. Behind it was a wall safe. I watched, mesmerized. I never knew we had a wall safe. My father spun the dial. He knew the combination by heart. Left, right, left. He pulled the handle, and the heavy steel door swung open. He took the gray lockbox, the one containing God knows what, and placed it inside the wall safe. Then, he reached into his coat pocket. He pulled out a thick envelope. He hesitated. He looked at the envelope, then at the open safe. He placed the envelope on top of the lockbox. He closed the safe. He spun the dial. He swung the painting back into place. Then he slumped into his desk chair and put his head in his hands. The video ended. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. He didn't take the box to a bank, I whispered. He didn't destroy it. He hid it, Rowan said softly. He brought it back and buried it in the wall. Whatever is in that box, whatever papers he signed or didn't sign, they are still in that house. The envelope, Camilla said, pointing at the frozen screen. Did you see the name on the envelope? I leaned in. The resolution was grainy, but the white rectangle of the envelope was visible against the gray metal of the lockbox. There was writing on it in thick black marker. Phoebe. My name. My father had come back to the house after watching me get beaten. He had hidden the evidence of whatever crime had been committed, and he had left something for me. The safe, I said, turning to Camilla. It is behind the painting in the study, the painting of the ship. Do you think it is still there? Camilla asked. Marissa redecorated everything, I said, my mind racing back to my visit earlier that evening. She changed the furniture, she painted the walls, but the study. She said Richard was sleeping in the study. She didn't let me go in there. If she found the safe, Rowan said, she would have destroyed everything inside. No, I said. Marissa is greedy, but she isn't smart about security. She moved the key to the lockbox recently. I saw the dust outline. That means she has the box, or she knows where it is. But the wall safe? If she doesn't know the combination... Richard knows the combination, Camilla said, but Richard can't speak. He can speak enough, I said. He told me the box. He was trying to tell me. I looked at Rowan. I need this video. I need all of it. Take it, Rowan said, handing me a USB drive. I am done carrying it. I took the drive. It felt warm in my hand. Thank you, I said. Rowan looked at me, his eyes sad. Be careful, Phoebe. People who forge wills and beat their kids, they don't give up easy. Neither do I said. We walked back out into the rain. The city felt different now. Before, I was looking for a needle in a haystack. Now, I had a map. The safe is the target, Camilla said as we got into the car. We need to get into that study. We need to get behind that painting. I have a plan, I said, starting the engine. Marissa wants money. She wants a bridge loan to stop the foreclosure. I am going to give her exactly what she wants. I am going to buy my way back into that house. And then? And then, I said, shifting the car into gear, I am going to break into the wall. The video file named StudyCam005 played on a loop on my laptop screen, casting a flickering blue light across the small table in Rowan's apartment. I watched it for the 5th time. my coffee growing cold in the mug. In the grainy footage, my father stood in the center of his study. He looked 15 years younger, yet somehow older than the man I had seen in the wheelchair yesterday. He carried the weight of the world in the slump of his shoulders. I watched as he approached the wall behind his mahogany desk. He reached out and swung the large oil painting of the frigate ship to the left, revealing the wall safe I had never known existed. His fingers moved over the dial, right to 40, left to 10, right to 25. I memorized the sequence instantly. Then came the moment that made my chest ache with a dull, hollow throb. Richard Diaz reached into the safe and pulled out a stack of papers. He placed the gray lockbox inside, but he didn't close the door immediately. He reached into his coat pocket and withdrew a thick, manila envelope. He held it for a moment, his thumb tracing the edge. He took a marker from his desk and wrote something on the front. He turned the envelope toward the camera for a split second before placing it on top of the lockbox. Phoebe, my name, written in his blocky architectural script. He stared at the open safe. I could see the conflict warring in his face. He looked like a man standing on the edge of a cliff, debating whether to jump or step back. If he mailed that envelope, if he handed that lockbox to a lawyer, he would save me. He would honor his dead wife, but he would destroy his new marriage. He would have to admit that he had married a monster. Fear won. He closed the heavy steel door. He spun the dial. He swung the painting back into place, and just like that, the truth was buried in the wall, and I was abandoned to the wolves. He wanted to do the right thing, Rowan said softly from the corner of the room. Wanting doesn't count, I said, my voice hard. He buried the evidence. He chose his comfort over my safety. Rowan reached into a cardboard box at his feet. He didn't bury everything, or at least, he didn't do a good enough job. He handed me a document. It was a photocopy, the paper yellowed with age and smelling faintly of mildew. This is the original, Rowan said. The one Marissa tried to make disappear. I took the paper. It was the last will and testament of Elaine Diaz, dated 3 years before her death. I scanned the clauses, my eyes hunting for the assets section. Article 4. I hereby give, devise, and bequeath the real property located at 442 Sycamore Lane, Maple Crest Hills, to my daughter, Phoebe Diaz, to be held in trust until her 21st birthday, at which time she shall assume full and sole ownership. There it was. The house was mine. It had always been mine. Marissa came into the firm 2 weeks after the funeral, Rowan explained, his voice thick with disgust. She brought this copy, but she also brought a marked-up version she had typed herself. She told Mr. Brenton that there had been a mistake. She said Elaine meant to leave the house to Richard to ensure the family stayed together. She called it a clerical error that needed to be corrected. And Brenton just agreed? I asked. Marissa knew which buttons to push, Rowan said. She knew Brenton was in debt. She knew he was desperate. She didn't just ask him to draft a new will. She pressured him to backdate it, to notarize it with a date from 6 months prior, when Elaine was still alive. That is why the signature on the fake will looked so perfect. They lifted it from a health insurance form and photoshopped it onto the new document. It was a clumsy job, but legally binding as long as no one challenged it. Camilla, who had been pacing the small room, stopped and looked at the timeline we had drawn on a legal pad. This is it, she said, tapping the table. We have the copy of the real will. We have the witness who saw the forgery happen, and we have the video proving Richard hid the original assets. So we go to the police, I said. Not yet, Camilla countered. The police will call this a civil dispute. They will say it is a he said, she said regarding an estate from 15 years ago, and the statute of limitations on the fraud itself might be tricky depending on how we frame it. If we want to stop the foreclosure and get the house back, we need the court to invalidate the current deed. We need the physical proof, I said. We need what is in that safe. Exactly, Camilla said. But we can't just break in. If you go into that house and crack that safe without a court order, Marissa will claim you planted the evidence. Or worse, she will sue you for burglary, and the evidence will be inadmissible. I felt a surge of frustration. So I am supposed to just let it sit there? She is going to lose the house, Camilla. The bank is going to take it, and they will empty that house, and the safe will be discovered by strangers. No, Camilla said, a sharp glint in her eyes. We don't break in. We get invited in, by the owner. Marissa is the owner, I said. According to the fraud, yes, Camilla said. But Richard is the occupant, and Richard is a vulnerable adult who has recently suffered a major medical event. She pulled a fresh file from her briefcase. We file a petition for guardian ad litem, Camilla said. We argue that Richard Diaz is incapacitated and that his current caretaker, Marissa, has a conflict of interest and is committing financial abuse. We show the court the foreclosure notice. We show them the suspicious loans. We argue that Marissa is bleeding his estate dry and endangering his housing. If the court appoints me as his guardian, I realized, I have legal access to the house. I can enter the study. I can open the safe to inventory his assets. Bingo, Camilla said. But to get that appointment, we need more than just financial records. We need to prove isolation. We need to prove she is controlling him. Ethan said she doesn't let anyone see him, I said. He said she controls the phone. We need independent verification, Camilla said. Where is he doing his rehab? Cedar Ridge, I said. Then we need to talk to the people who wipe his chin and change his sheets, Camilla said. Nurses see everything. Cedar Ridge Rehabilitation Center was a sprawling, sterile complex on the west side of Briarwood. It smelled of lavender cleaning spray and despair. I didn't go as a visitor. I went as a potential client touring the facility for a fictional aunt, while the administrator was busy grabbing brochures from the front desk. I slipped into the hallway of the stroke recovery wing. I found a nurse's station where two women in blue scrubs were charting. One of them, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a tired expression, looked up. Her name tag read Betty. Excuse me, I said, keeping my voice low. I am looking for information on a patient. Richard Diaz. Betty's expression tightened instantly. Are you family? I am his daughter, I said. Phoebe. Betty softened, but she glanced nervously down the hall. Honey, you aren't on the list. His wife, Mrs. Diaz. She was very specific. No visitors, unless approved by her personally. I know, I said. That is why I am worried. Does she come often? Betty sighed, leaning over the counter and lowering her voice to a whisper. She comes once a week, usually to yell at him about signing checks. The poor man cries every time she leaves. Last week, she took his cell phone away because she caught him trying to make a call. Did he say who he was calling? I asked. He was trying to call a lawyer, Betty said. I heard him shouting, trying to shout something about a box. He kept saying, the box, the box. Mrs. Diaz told us he was hallucinating from the medication. She told us to increase his sedative if he got agitated again. My blood ran cold. She was drugging him to keep him quiet. Betty, I said, reaching into my purse and pulling out my business card. My lawyer is going to call you. I need you to tell her exactly what you just told me. About the phone, about the checks, about the sedatives. Betty looked at the card, then at me. I could lose my job. If you don't speak up, I said. My father is going to lose his life. Please. She hesitated, then nodded once, sharp and quick. Have her call me after 7. That is when my shift ends. I walked out of Cedar Ridge feeling a grim sense of victory. We had the testimony. We had the financial trail. We had the video. We were ready to file the petition. But Marissa was faster. The next morning, I was at my desk at Atlas Metrics. The morning sun was streaming through the glass walls of the 42nd floor, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. I was reviewing a risk model for a logistics firm, trying to force my brain to focus on supply chains instead of wall safes. My internal phone rang. Ms. Diaz. It was the receptionist in the lobby. Her voice sounded strained. There are 2 gentlemen here to see you, from the sheriff's department. My stomach dropped. Send them up. I stood up and walked to the glass wall of my office. I could see the elevator bank. A moment later, the doors opened. 2 uniformed deputies stepped out. The entire floor went silent. At Atlas Metrics, the only people who wore uniforms were the delivery guys. Police were a disruption. Police meant trouble. My colleagues, people I had worked with for 5 years, people who respected my precision and my privacy, stopped typing. Heads turned. Whispers started. I walked out to meet them, trying to keep my head high. "Phoebe Diaz?" the older deputy asked. He wasn't aggressive, but his voice carried across the open-plan office. "I am Phoebe Diaz," I said. "I am serving you with a temporary restraining order," he said, handing me a thick stack of folded papers. "Issued this morning by Judge Miller." I took the papers. My hands were shaking, and I hated it. I hated that everyone was watching. I hated the burning heat rising in my cheeks. "A restraining order?" I asked. "On what grounds?" "Harassment, threats of violence, and elder abuse," the deputy recited, reading from his clipboard. "The petitioner, Marissa Diaz, alleges that you entered her home unlawfully 2 nights ago, threatened her with physical harm, and caused distinct emotional distress to her husband, Richard Diaz, resulting in a medical setback." "That is a lie," I said, my voice rising. "I was invited. I was there to help." "You can tell it to the judge, ma'am," the deputy said. "The hearing is in 10 days. Until then, you are to stay 500 yards away from Marissa Diaz, Richard Diaz, and the property at 442 Sycamore Lane. If you violate this order, you will be arrested." He handed me a second sheet. "This is a notice to appear. Sign here." I signed. The pen felt like it weighed 100 pounds. The deputies turned and left. The elevator doors closed behind them. The silence on the floor was deafening. I could feel the eyes of my team boring into my back. Phoebe the professional, Phoebe the calm analyst, Phoebe the criminal. I walked back into my office and closed the door. I pulled the blinds, shutting out the stares. I opened the paperwork. Marissa's affidavit was a masterpiece of fiction. She claimed I had broken into the house, technically true, since I used the unlocked door to get the scarf. She claimed I had screamed at her, a projection of her own behavior. She claimed Richard had been terrorized by my presence. She had flipped the board. By filing for protection first, she had painted me as the aggressor. If I tried to file for guardianship now, it would look like retaliation. It would look like a disgruntled, violent daughter trying to seize control from the grieving, terrified wife. She had weaponized the legal system to keep me away from the house, to keep me away from the safe. She was buying time. I slammed the paperwork down on my desk. "You want to play dirty, Marissa?" I hissed at the empty room. My phone buzzed. It was Camilla. "Don't tell me," I answered. "You saw the docket." "She filed an ex parte order," Camilla said, her voice tight. "She beat us to the punch. This complicates things. Phoebe, the judge granted it based on her statement alone. We are locked out." "She knows I saw the key cabinet," I said. "She knows I'm coming for the box. She did this to buy time to find the safe herself." "If she finds that safe before the hearing," Camilla said, "she will destroy everything inside. We won't just lose the case, we will lose the proof." "I can't go to the house," I said. "I'll be arrested." "You can't go," Camilla agreed. "But we need eyes inside that house. We need someone who isn't named in the restraining order." I looked at the paperwork again. The order named Phoebe Diaz. It didn't name anyone else. "Ethan," I said. "Ethan is a liability," Camilla warned. "He is terrified of her." "He is terrified of being poor," I corrected. "And he is the only one left inside the walls." I grabbed my purse. I didn't care about the stares of my coworkers anymore. I didn't care about my job. I had a 10-day clock ticking down, and my enemy was locked in a house with the only evidence that could save me. I was going to have to turn the hostage into a soldier. The silence in my apartment was heavy, a physical weight that pressed against my eardrums. I sat on the floor of my living room, surrounded by a fortress of paper, legal pads, printed statutes, and old photographs were scattered across the rug like debris from a shipwreck. It was 3 a.m, the hour of the wolf, when the mind turns against itself. I felt like I was 19 years old again. That was the worst part. It wasn't the legal threat or the potential loss of the house that kept me awake. It was the feeling of regression. For 15 years, I had built a life based on control. I analyzed risk. I predicted outcomes. I made sure that I was never the one caught off guard. But Marissa had snapped her fingers, filed a single piece of paper, and suddenly I was the voiceless teenager again, locked out of my own home, while she spun a narrative of victimhood that the world was all too ready to believe. The restraining order hearing was 48 hours away. If Marissa won, the temporary order would become permanent. I would be legally barred from stepping foot on the property at Maple Crest Hills. I would be barred from seeing my father. The wall safe, and the box hidden inside it, would be lost forever. Marissa would have all the time she needed to find the combination, drill the lock, and incinerate the only proof I had. My phone buzzed against the hardwood floor. The sound made me flinch. I picked it up. It was a text from a number I hadn't saved, but I recognized the area code. She is losing her mind. She knows about the video. She has been tearing the study apart for 2 days. She keeps screaming about a leak. I think she's going to call a locksmith. Ethan. My heart hammered against my ribs. A locksmith. If she opened that safe before the hearing, it was game over. I typed back, my fingers cold. Meet me, now. I can't, he replied. She is watching the driveway. If she finds that box, you lose the house too. I wrote, she will sell it and vanish. You know that. There was a long pause. 3 dots danced on the screen, then disappeared. Finally, a response. The diner on 4th, 20 minutes. I didn't bother changing out of my hoodie. I grabbed my keys and the envelope of cash I kept for emergencies. I was done playing by the rules of polite society. Marissa had dragged us into the mud, so I was going to dress for the occasion. The diner was a 24-hour spot with fluorescent lights that buzzed like trapped flies. Ethan was sitting in a booth in the back, hunched over a mug of black coffee. He looked terrible. His skin was sallow, and his eyes were rimmed with red. He looked like a man who was vibrating with anxiety. I slid into the booth opposite him. He jumped, spilling a little coffee onto the laminate table. Did anyone follow you? I asked. No, he whispered, wiping the spill with a napkin. She is in the study. She is throwing books off the shelves. She thinks the safe is behind the bookshelves. She hasn't checked the painting yet. She will, I said. It is only a matter of time. Ethan looked up at me, and for the first time, I saw the resemblance to our father. He had Richard's chin, his weak, uncertain mouth. I sent it, he said. I stared at him. What? The video, he said, his voice cracking. The email. It was me. I sent you the link. I leaned back, the shock hitting me like a physical blow. I had assumed it was Rowan Blake entirely, or perhaps a collaborative effort. But Ethan? The boy who cowered in the kitchen? How? I asked. Rowan Blake had the files. Rowan had the will, Ethan corrected. I didn't know about Rowan. I found the hard drive in the attic. Mom, Marissa, she made me clean it out last month to look for things to sell. I found a box of old electronics Dad had packed away. There was an external drive labeled Security Backup 2009. I plugged it in. He swallowed hard. I watched it. I watched what she did to you. And you didn't tell her? Tell her? Ethan let out a bitter, jagged laugh. Phoebe, you don't talk to her. You survive her. If I told her I found it, she would have destroyed it, and then she would have turned on me. So you sent it to me, I said. Why? Why now? Because she is going to ruin us, Ethan said, his hands shaking around the mug. She acts like she is protecting the family, but she is bleeding us dry. She spent Dad's pension. She maxed out the credit cards, and now the bank is coming. I thought if you saw the video, you would come back. You were the only one who ever stood up to her. I thought you would know how to stop her. I looked at him, this terrified, half-grown man who was paralyzed by the same monster that had chased me away. I felt a surge of anger, sharp and hot. He had used me. He had thrown a grenade into my life because he was too scared to pull the pin himself. But beneath the anger, there was pity. He was still in the cage. I had escaped. He had been living in the war zone for 15 years. "I can stop her," I said, my voice low and steady. "But I need you to do something for me, and it is going to be the hardest thing you have ever done." "I can't stand up to her," he said immediately, shrinking back. "She will kick me out. I have nowhere to go. Phoebe, I don't have a degree. I don't have money." "I am not asking you to fight her in the kitchen," I said. "I am asking you to fight her in court." Ethan went pale. "No, no way." "Listen to me." I leaned across the table, invading his space. "In 2 days, there is a hearing. Marissa is going to tell the judge that I am dangerous. She is going to say I threatened Dad. If the judge believes her, I am banned from the house, and she wins. She will find the safe. She will burn the will, and the bank will take the house. You will be on the street anyway." Ethan stared at me, his eyes wide with fear. "But," I continued, "if you come to court and tell the truth, just the truth, Ethan, we can win. You tell the judge that Marissa controls Dad. You tell them about the phone. You tell them that I was invited into the house. You destroy her credibility." "She will kill me," he whispered. "She will try," I said. "But here is the deal. If you help me expose her, if you help me get that house back, I will make sure you get your share." He blinked. "What?" "I don't care about the money," I said. "I make my own money. I care about the truth. I care about what is in that box. If we win, and the will is overturned, the house reverts to me, I will sell it, and I will give you enough to start over. Anywhere you want. You can get away from her. You can be free." I watched the calculation happen behind his eyes. It was the survival instinct kicking in. He was weighing the terror of his mother against the terror of poverty. "You promise?" he asked. "I am a risk analyst, Ethan," I said. "I don't make bets I can't cover. I promise." He nodded slowly. It wasn't a brave nod. It was a desperate one. We sat in silence for a moment. The waitress poured more coffee, the steam rising between us. "Ethan," I said softly, "I need to ask you something that has been haunting me." He looked up. "Did Dad ever talk about it?" I asked. "The box? The day I left? Did he ever explain why he walked out with that lockbox instead of helping me?" Ethan looked down at his hands. "He doesn't talk much anymore. Even before the stroke. He just existed. But sometimes, at night, when he thought everyone was asleep, I would hear him in the study. He would be talking to the wall." "To the safe," I whispered. "He would say, 'I am sorry,'" Ethan said. "Over and over again. 'I am sorry, Elaine. I am sorry, Phoebe. I am a coward.' That is all he ever said." I closed my eyes. The pain of it was sharp. But it was a clean pain. It confirmed what I had suspected. My father wasn't a villain in the traditional sense. He was a man hollowed out by fear. A man who had made a catastrophic moral error and had spent 15 years trying to preserve the evidence of it because he couldn't bear to destroy it, yet couldn't find the courage to reveal it. He had saved the box because the box was his confession. The next day was a blur of strategy. I spent 12 hours in Camilla's office, preparing for the hearing. Camilla was a drill sergeant. She paced back and forth in front of the whiteboard, firing questions at me. "Marissa claims you pushed past her to enter the home," Camilla barked. "I walked through an unlocked door after being invited in for tea 20 minutes prior," I recited, my voice flat. "She claims you screamed at Richard and caused him to hyperventilate." I spoke to my father in a whisper. Marissa was the one shouting at Ethan in the kitchen. "She claims you have a history of violence and mental instability. I have a security clearance for my job. I undergo annual psychological evaluations. I have 0 criminal record. Marissa has a history of fraud allegations linked to her real estate license." "Good," Camilla said, stopping to look at me. But you are too robotic. You need to be human. Phoebe, the judge needs to see a concerned daughter, not a calculator. I am a calculator, I said. That is how I survive. Not tomorrow, Camilla said. Tomorrow. You are a woman who just wants to make sure her dying father isn't being abused. And when we play that video, the video of her hitting you, you don't look angry. You look sad. You let the judge be angry for you. We are playing the video? If she opens the door to character attacks, Camilla said, a shark-like grin spreading across her face. And she will. Narcissists always overplay their hand. She will try to paint you as the monster, and then we will show the court who the real monster is. That night, the night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. I lay in my bed, staring at the ceiling, the city sounds of Briarwood drifting through the window. When I finally drifted off, the dream was waiting for me. I was back in the hallway. The wallpaper was the old floral damask. The light was the gray, diffuse light of an Ohio autumn. I saw myself, 19 years old, crying, cowering against the wainscoting. Marissa was there, her hand raised, her face twisted in that familiar, hateful snarl. "Ungrateful!" she screamed. "Leech!" In the dream, I didn't run away. I didn't climb out the window. The adult Phoebe, the 34-year-old Phoebe, stepped out of the shadows. I was wearing my business suit. I stood between the girl and the woman. Marissa struck out, but her hand didn't hit skin. It hit metal. I was holding the lockbox. I was holding it like a shield. The blow rang out, a dull clang that vibrated through my bones. Marissa recoiled, clutching her hand. I looked down at the box. It wasn't gray anymore. It was glowing. It was heavy. But it wasn't a burden. It was an anchor. I looked at my younger self. She wasn't crying anymore. She was looking at me with wide, trusting eyes. "It is okay," I told her. "We have the truth now." Then I looked at the front door. My father was standing there. He wasn't walking away. He was standing still, watching me. He looked sad, but he wasn't leaving. He nodded at me, once, as if acknowledging that the burden had finally been passed. I woke up with a gasp. The room was filled with the gray light of dawn. My alarm was set to go off in 5 minutes. I lay there, feeling the rapid beat of my heart slow down. The dread that had been sitting on my chest for days was gone. It had been replaced by a strange, crystalline clarity. For days, I had told myself this was about revenge. It was about making Marissa pay. It was about getting the house back. But as I threw off the covers and stood up, I realized I had been wrong. It wasn't about the house. It wasn't even about the money. It was about the narrative. For 15 years, Marissa had held the pen. She had written the story of our family. She had written me as the villain, my father as the victim, and herself as the savior. She had forged the will, forged the past, and forged the reality we lived in. Today, I was going to take the pen back. I walked to the closet and chose my outfit, a navy blue suit, sharp, professional, but underneath, I wore a silver locket my mother had given me. I picked up my briefcase. Inside was the USB drive with the videos. Inside was the affidavit Ethan had signed late last night in the diner. Inside was the timeline of the fraudulent loans. I wasn't going to court to fight. I was going to court to end it. I looked at myself in the mirror. "Why did you take the box, Dad?" I whispered to my reflection. The answer came to me, not from memory, but from instinct. Because you knew one day I would come back for it. I walked out of my apartment and locked the door. I didn't look back. The past was a closed room, and I was holding the key. It was time to open it up and let the light in. No matter what burned in the process, the courtroom smelled of lemon floor wax and stale anxiety, a scent I had become intimately familiar with over the last 48 hours. I sat at the defendant's table, my hands folded on top of a pristine manila folder. Beside me, Camila Ortiz was a statue of calm energy, her pen tapping a silent, rhythmic code against her legal pad. Across the aisle, Marissa Diaz was putting on the performance of her life. She was dressed in a soft, powder blue cardigan and a modest skirt, an outfit chosen specifically to project frailty. She had forgone her usual heavy makeup, leaving her face pale. I noted with a detached, professional appreciation that she had applied a subtle shadow of foundation to her left cheekbone to suggest a fading bruise. It was theater. It was a lie constructed for the benefit of Judge Vance, a stern-faced woman who looked like she had absolutely no patience for domestic drama. "He is a sick man, Your Honor," Marissa said, her voice trembling just enough to be audible without seeming hysterical. She dabbed at her dry eyes with a tissue. "My husband has suffered a massive stroke. He is vulnerable, and for 15 years, we heard nothing from his daughter, not a card, not a call. Then, suddenly, she appears at our door, demanding money, screaming at us, forcing her way into the house." She paused to take a shaky breath, looking directly at the judge. "I tried to be polite," Marissa continued. "I invited her in because I wanted peace, but she became violent. She lunged at me. She started screaming about how the house belonged to her dead mother. She grabbed my arm. Look." She pointed to the phantom bruise on her cheek. "I am terrified of her, Your Honor, and I am terrified for my husband. If she comes back to that house, she will kill him with the stress. I'm just asking for protection." The courtroom was silent. Marissa's lawyer, a slick man in a cheap suit named Mr. Garris, nodded solemnly. "The petitioner rests," Garris said. Judge Vance looked at me. Her expression was unreadable, but I could feel the weight of her judgment. To her, I was just another estranged child looking for a handout. "Ms. Ortiz," the judge said, "your witness." Camilla stood up. She didn't walk toward the podium immediately. She adjusted her blazer, took a sip of water, and then looked at Marissa. "Mrs. Diaz," Camilla began, her voice pleasant, "you stated that my client, Phoebe Diaz, has a history of violent outbursts. Is that correct?" "Yes," Marissa said, sniffing. "She was always unstable, even as a teenager." "And you stated in your affidavit that you have never laid a hand on her? That you have always been a loving, supportive stepmother?" "I loved her like my own," Marissa said. "I never touched her." Camilla nodded. She turned to the judge. "Your Honor, the defense disputes the characterization of the defendant as the aggressor. In fact, we argue that the petitioner is projecting her own history of domestic violence onto my client. To establish credibility and a pattern of behavior, we would like to enter Exhibit A into evidence." "Objection," Garris shot up. "Ambush. We haven't seen this exhibit." "It was emailed to counsel 2 hours ago," Camilla said smoothly, "and I have a copy here on a flash drive." "What is it?" Judge Vance asked, peering over her glasses. "It is security camera footage from the residence at Sycamore Lane," Camilla said. "Time-stamped October 14th, 2009. 2009? Garris scoffed. "Your Honor, this is 15 years ago. It is irrelevant. We are here to discuss an incident that happened 3 days ago." "It goes to the core of the witness's credibility, Your Honor," Camilla countered, her voice hardening. "The witness just testified under oath that she has never touched my client. If she lied about that, her entire testimony regarding the events of this week is suspect." Judge Vance looked at Marissa, who had gone very still. "I will allow it," the judge said, "but make it quick." Camilla plugged the drive into the court's AV system. The large monitor on the wall flickered to life. The room went deadly quiet. There was the hallway, there was the floral wallpaper, there was 19-year-old me, cowering against the wall, and there was Marissa. The video played for 42 seconds. It showed the shove, it showed the slap, it showed the way she grabbed my hair. It showed her mouth contorted in a scream of rage that needed no audio to be understood. It showed a woman who was not a victim, but a predator. Marissa stared at the screen, her mouth slightly open. The color had drained from her face for real this time. The video ended. "Mrs. Diaz," Camilla said into the silence, "is that you in the video?" Marissa gripped the railing of the witness stand. That was a difficult time. She was out of control. I was restraining her. You struck her in the face, Camilla said. Is that your definition of restraint? I don't remember, Marissa stammered. No further questions, Camilla said. Marissa stepped down, her legs unsteady. She didn't look at me. She looked at the floor. Call your next witness, Judge Vance said, her tone noticeably colder. The defense calls Ethan Diaz, Camilla announced. The doors at the back of the courtroom opened. Ethan walked in. He looked like he was walking to his execution. He was wearing a suit that was slightly too big for him, likely one of Richard's old ones. He kept his head down as he passed Marissa. I saw her reach out a hand as if to grab him, then pull back. Her eyes were wide with shock. She hadn't expected this. Ethan took the stand. He swore to tell the truth. He was shaking so badly that the microphone picked up the vibration of his hand on the wood. Ethan, Camilla said gently, you signed a witness statement supporting your mother's request for a restraining order. Do you have that statement in front of you? Yes, Ethan whispered. In this statement, you claim that Phoebe Diaz forced her way into the house and threatened your father. Is that true? Ethan looked at me. I offered him a small, steady nod. The truth, I mouthed. He looked at Marissa. She was glaring at him, her eyes drilling holes into his skull. It was the look that had kept him silent for a decade. Ethan took a deep breath. No. A murmur ran through the courtroom. No? Camilla asked. Why did you sign it? My mother wrote it, Ethan said, his voice gaining a fraction of strength. She printed it out and told me that if I didn't sign it, Phoebe would take the house and we would be homeless. She told me exactly what to say to the police. She rehearsed it with me in the kitchen. So Phoebe was invited in? Yes, Ethan said. Mom, Marissa was pretending to be nice. She wanted Phoebe to give us money for the bridge loan. Phoebe never yelled. She never threatened Dad. She just asked about the lockbox. The lockbox? Camilla asked. Objection, Garris yelled. Beyond the scope. Sustained, Judge Vance said. Stick to the violence, counselor. Did you feel threatened by your sister? Camilla asked. No, Ethan said. I felt ashamed. Thank you, Ethan, Camilla said. As Ethan stepped down, he practically ran out of the courtroom, avoiding his mother's gaze entirely. Marissa was vibrating with rage. I could see the tendons in her neck standing out. Mrs. Diaz, please return to the stand, Camilla said. Marissa stood up. She wasn't playing the frail victim anymore. She was cornered, and she was angry. Mrs. Diaz, Camilla said, flipping through her notes. You mentioned that you needed a bridge loan because of title issues. You claimed these were clerical errors regarding the estate of Elaine Diaz. That is correct, Marissa snapped. When exactly was the will of Elaine Diaz amended to transfer the property to your husband? I don't know the exact date, Marissa said. It was shortly before she died. She wanted Richard to be secure. Interesting, Camilla said, because we have an affidavit here from Rowan Blake, a former employee of Brenton and Pike. Rowan stood up in the back of the room. Marissa's eyes darted to him. She recognized him. Mr. Blake testifies that you brought a draft of the will to the firm after Elaine Diaz's death, Camilla said, and that you insisted it be backdated. That is a lie, Marissa shouted. That drug addict? You are going to take his word over mine? I haven't introduced his history, Mrs. Diaz, Camilla said calmly. How did you know he had a history of drug use? Unless you knew him personally? Unless you were a regular client of a firm known for ethical violations? Everyone knew, Marissa said, stumbling. The firm was sloppy. That is why we had to fix the paperwork. Elaine's original will was lost. I just reconstructed what she wanted. You reconstructed it? Camilla pounced. So you admit the document submitted to the bank was not the original signed by Elaine Diaz? I meant I had to make sure the legal language matched her intent, Marissa yelled. I was protecting my husband. Phoebe abandoned him. She left him to rot. Your Honor, Camilla said, turning to the bench, we have established that the petitioner has lied about the violence. coerced a witness, and now admits to altering testamentary documents. This restraining order is a tool to prevent my client from investigating the mismanagement of her father's estate. Judge Vance held up a hand. She looked tired. She looked at Marissa with an expression of profound distaste. "I have heard enough," the judge said. She banged her gavel once. "The petition for a permanent restraining order is denied. The temporary order is vacated immediately." Marissa gasped. "But, Your Honor, she is dangerous." "The only danger I see here, Mrs. Diaz, is to the truth," Judge Vance said. "Furthermore, based on the testimony regarding the potential mishandling of the estate and the vulnerability of Mr. Diaz, I am issuing a temporary preservation order. No assets, documents, or personal property are to be removed from the residence at 442 Sycamore Lane. Specifically, the contents of any safes or lockboxes are to remain sealed until a probate court can review the matter." "You can't do that," Marissa shrieked. "That is my house." "And I am granting Ms. Diaz supervised access to the property to visit her father." The judge continued, ignoring her. "Beginning tomorrow at 9 o'clock in the morning, sheriff's deputies will be present to ensure the peace is kept. Court is adjourned." The gavel banged again. I let out a breath, my entire body sagging with relief. We had done it. We hadn't just won. We had blown the doors off. Marissa was standing at her table, frozen. Her lawyer was packing his briefcase, clearly eager to get away from a losing client. I stood up and walked toward the exit. Camilla was right behind me. In the hallway outside the courtroom, the air was cooler. I felt lightheaded, but before we could reach the elevators, a hand slammed against the wall in front of me, blocking my path. It was Marissa. The cardigan was unbuttoned, hanging loosely off her shoulders. Her hair was messy. The mask was gone. The fake bruise on her cheek looked ridiculous now. A smudge of dirt on a face twisted by pure, unfiltered hatred. "You think you won?" she hissed. Her voice was a low, guttural growl. "You think because you played a little movie, you get to walk back into my life?" "It is over, Marissa," I said, meeting her gaze. "The judge gave the order. I am coming to the house tomorrow, and I am going to open the safe." Her eyes widened, not with anger this time, but with a flash of genuine, primal terror. "You stay away from that safe," she whispered. "You have no idea what you are doing. You are going to kill him. Phoebe, you think you are saving him? You are going to destroy the only thing keeping him alive." "I am saving him from you," I said. "You stupid girl," she spat. "You think this is about the money? You think I care about the damn house? Take the house. Take the money. But if you open that box, if you let that out, you are going to wish you had stayed gone." She leaned in closer, her breath smelling of peppermint and bile. "Some secrets are buried for a reason," she said. "Your father isn't the saint you think he is, and if you expose him, the shame won't kill me, it will kill him." She pulled back, straightened her cardigan, and glared at me one last time. "I will sue you for emotional distress," she threatened, but the words lacked weight. "I will tie this up in court for 10 years. She turned and marched down the hallway, her heels clicking a frantic rhythm on the marble floor. I watched her go. "She is bluffing," Camilla said, stepping up beside me. "She is trying to scare you off." "No," I said slowly. "She isn't bluffing about the fear. Did you see her eyes?" I replayed the conversation in my head. Take the house. Take the money. Marissa Diaz was a woman who defined herself by her possessions. She was a woman who had clawed her way into my mother's life to steal her security, for her to offer up the house, to dismiss the money. That was impossible, unless the alternative was worse. "She doesn't care about the fraud anymore," I said. "She knows we can prove the will is fake. She knows she's going to lose the assets, but she is terrified of the box." "What could be in there?" Camilla asked. "We know it has the original will. We know it has the video of him hiding it." "She said it would destroy him," I said. "She said he isn't a saint." I looked at the elevator doors as they opened. "We need to move fast," I told Camilla. She is desperate. A desperate woman doesn't wait for a court order. She is going to go home, and she is going to try to get into that wall safe tonight. She will take a sledgehammer to it if she has to. The preservation order. A piece of paper won't stop a fire, I interrupted. We need to file the emergency motion for guardianship immediately. I need legal authority to take physical custody of my father in that house before the sun comes up tomorrow. I will draft it now, Camilla said, pulling out her phone. We will find a judge on call. But Phoebe, are you ready for what is in that box? If she is right? If Richard did something terrible? I thought about the man in the wheelchair. I thought about the man in the video, agonizing over the envelope. He is my father, I said. Whatever he did, he carried it alone for 15 years. I am not going to let him die with the weight of it. Let's go, Camilla said. We stepped into the elevator. The doors closed, sealing us in. The trial was over. But the war had just entered its final, most dangerous phase. Marissa was going back to the castle to burn history, and I had to get there before the smoke cleared. The ink on the emergency court order was barely dry when we pulled up to the curb in front of the house at Maple Crest Hills. It was raining again, a relentless, driving sheet of gray water that battered the roof of my car. It felt appropriate. We were not here for a social call. We were here for a raid. I stepped out of the car, shielding my eyes against the downpour. Camilla was right beside me, her briefcase clutched to her chest like a weapon. Behind us, pulling up in a black sedan, was Arthur Henderson. He was the court-appointed independent financial conservator, a man with a face like granite and a reputation for forensic ruthlessness. He carried the authority of the state of Ohio in his pocket. We walked up the driveway in a phalanx. I looked at the front door, the same door my father had walked out of 15 years ago, and felt a surge of cold adrenaline. This was it, the end of the waiting. Marissa opened the door before we could ring the bell. She was wearing a silk dressing gown, her hair perfectly coiffed, but her eyes were wild. She blocked the threshold, her hand gripping the frame. "You cannot come in," she hissed, her voice pitching high over the sound of the rain. "Richard is resting. The doctor said he needs absolute quiet. If you disturb him now, you are liable for whatever happens to his heart." "Mrs. Diaz," Arthur Henderson said, stepping forward. He didn't shout, but his voice cut through the noise of the storm with effortless authority. "I have a court order signed by Judge Vance less than 2 hours ago. It grants me immediate access to inventory all secured assets in this residence. You have 2 choices. You can step aside, or I can ask the deputies in the vehicle behind me to remove you for obstruction of justice." Marissa faltered. She looked at the deputies sitting in the patrol car at the end of the driveway. She looked at me, her gaze venomous. Then, she stepped back. "He is in the study," she spat. "If he dies because of this, Phoebe, it is on your hands." I didn't answer her. I walked past her into the foyer. The house smelled of stale lilies and antiseptic. We moved straight to the study. The door was closed. I pushed it open. My father was sitting in his wheelchair by the window, staring out at the rain. He looked smaller than he had in the courtroom, frail and translucent, like a paper lantern that had burned down to the wick. When we entered, he turned his head. His eyes found mine, and for the first time in years, I didn't see confusion. I saw relief. "Mr. Diaz," Henderson said gently, "I am Arthur Henderson. The court has sent me to secure your assets. We are going to open the wall safe now." Richard nodded. It was a barely perceptible movement, but it was enough. Marissa was hovering in the doorway, her arms crossed, chewing on her thumbnail. "You won't find anything," she said, her voice trembling. "It is just old tax returns. You are wasting everyone's time." "Then this will be quick," Camilla said. I walked to the painting of the frigate ship. It was heavy. I gripped the frame and swung it outward on its hinges. There it was, the wall safe. The steel face was dull and dusty. "Do we have the combination?" Henderson asked. "I do," I said. I stepped up to the dial. My heart was hammering against my ribs so hard, I thought they could hear it. I closed my eyes for a second, summoning the image from the video Rowan had given me. Right to 40, left to 10, right to 25. I spun the dial. The tumblers clicked. A dry mechanical sound in the silent room. I gripped the handle and pulled. The heavy steel door swung open. I let out a breath I didn't know I had been holding. The safe was packed tight. There were stacks of folders, rubber-banded wads of cash, and jewelry boxes. Tucked in the back corner was a heavy ring of keys with a yellow plastic tag labeled Founders Federal Trust, a bank I didn't recognize, likely an offshore or out-of-state account where Marissa had been siphoning funds. But in the center, sitting exactly where my father had placed it 15 years ago, was the gray metal lockbox. It was covered in a fine layer of dust. On top of it sat the manila envelope, the ink faded but legible. Phoebe. I reached in and took the box. It was heavy, cold, and real. Inventory item number 1, Henderson said, his voice devoid of emotion as he made a note on his clipboard. Gray Sentry safe lockbox, sealed. Open it, Camilla said. Mrs. Diaz. Henderson turned to Marissa. The key. I don't have it, Marissa said quickly. It has been lost for years. We saw the key cabinet. Marissa, I said, turning to face her. We saw the empty hook. Give him the key. I told you, I don't. If we have to drill it, Henderson interrupted, we will count it as destruction of property by the custodian. Produce the key, ma'am. Marissa stared at him, her chest heaving. Then, with a sound of pure frustration, she reached into the pocket of her dressing gown and threw a small silver key onto the desk. It skittered across the mahogany and stopped in front of me. I picked it up. My hand was shaking. I inserted the key into the lockbox. It turned with a stiff grind. I lifted the lid. The smell of old paper wafted up, a scent of vanilla and thyme. Inside, there were 3 things. First, a thick document bound in blue legal backing. I pulled it out. Last will and testament of Elaine Marie Diaz. I flipped to the back page. There was my mother's signature, shaky, real, and dated correctly. I handed it to Camilla. It is the original, Camilla whispered, scanning the text. It leaves the house to you, unconditionally. This proves the other one was a forgery. Second, there was a letter. It was written on my mother's personal stationery. The handwriting was jagged, the product of a hand fighting against tremors. My dearest Richard, I am writing this because I am afraid. I see the way she looks at the house. I see the way she looks at Phoebe. I know you think Marissa is helping us, but I fear she is pushing you into decisions you are too tired to fight. Please, Richard, protect our daughter. Protect her inheritance. Do not let my memory be erased. I felt a tear slide down my cheek. I wiped it away angrily. And this, I said, reaching for the third item. It was a USB drive, not a modern one, but an old, bulky stick from the mid-2000s. Mr. Henderson, I said, I need to play this, now. Henderson nodded. He opened his laptop on the desk and held out his hand. I gave him the drive. Marissa took a step forward, but Camilla blocked her path. Henderson plugged it in. A folder opened on the screen. There were 2 files. He clicked the first one. It was the full version of the hallway video. The one I had seen was 42 seconds of silence. This one had audio. The sound of shouting filled the study. It was Marissa's voice, shrill and distorted by the cheap microphone, but undeniable. Sign the damn papers, Phoebe. I am sick of you acting like you own this place. Then came the sound of tearing paper. On the screen, Marissa was ripping up a document. You think your mother's name protects you? She is dead. This is my house now. Then the violence. The slap sounded like a gunshot in the quiet study. The sound of my younger self crying, a high, terrified keen, made my stomach turn. Marissa, standing in the doorway, went pale. That is manipulated. That is AI. You can fake anything these days. This file was created 15 years ago, Henderson said, checking the properties. It predates deepfake technology by a decade. He clicked the second file. The screen changed. It was the view from the study camera. My father was sitting at this very desk. He was alone. He was holding a handheld voice recorder, a dictaphone. He pressed the button on the device. The audio from the video file was clear, capturing his voice as he spoke into the machine. "My name is Richard Diaz. It is October 14th. Today I failed." My father's voice on the recording was strong, not the rasp of the stroke victim. It was the voice I remembered from my childhood. Marissa made me sign the amendment. She told me it was the only way to get the loan. She told me the bank wouldn't accept Elaine's will because it was too old. I signed it. I didn't read it. I just wanted the fighting to stop. On the screen, Richard put his head in his hands. But she lied. I saw the papers afterwards. She changed the dates. She changed the beneficiary. And today I saw her hit Phoebe. I walked in, and I saw it. And instead of stopping her, instead of calling the police, I took the evidence and I ran. The Richard on the screen looked up at the camera, tears streaming down his face. If anyone hears this, it means I didn't have the courage to fix it while I was alive. I am a coward, but I will not be a thief. The house belongs to Phoebe. The truth belongs to her, too. This box contains my shame. I am locking it away because I cannot face it, but I cannot destroy it. The video ended. The silence in the room was absolute. It was broken only by the sound of the rain against the glass. Then, Marissa screamed. "He is insane!" she shrieked, lunging toward the desk. "He was losing his mind back then. He was medicated. Give me that drive." She grabbed for the laptop. Henderson was faster. He snapped the laptop shut and pulled it away. Camilla stepped in, grabbing Marissa's wrist as she tried to claw past her. "Do not touch the evidence," Camilla warned, her voice low and dangerous. "It is fake," Marissa yelled, struggling against Camilla's grip. "It is all a setup. You manipulated him. He didn't mean any of that." "Mrs. Diaz," Henderson barked, "step back, now, or you will be arrested for assault and destruction of evidence." Marissa froze. She looked at Henderson, then at the deputies who had appeared in the doorway, hands on their belts. She was panting, her hair wild, her eyes darting around the room like a trapped animal. "You are ruining us," she whispered, turning her gaze to Richard. "I took care of you. I wiped your chin. I managed your pills. And this is how you repay me? By letting your brat destroy everything?" Richard didn't look at her. He was looking at me. "Get her out," Henderson said to the deputies. "Please escort Mrs. Diaz to the kitchen and keep her there while we finish the inventory." The deputies took Marissa by the arms. She didn't fight them, but she kept screaming as they dragged her down the hall. "It is my house. You can't take it. It is mine." When her voice finally faded, the room felt heavy and still. Henderson began cataloging the contents of the box, placing each item into an evidence bag. "We have everything we need," he said. "This invalidates the amended will. It proves the fraud on the mortgage and the admission of coercion. It is a slam dunk." He zipped the bag shut. "We are done here." I turned to leave. I felt drained, hollowed out by the adrenaline crash. But as I passed the wheelchair, a cold hand shot out and grabbed my wrist. I stopped. My father was gripping me with his good hand. His strength was surprising. He pulled me down, closer to him. His eyes were wet. He opened his mouth, working his jaw, fighting against the paralysis that had stolen his voice. "Phoebe," he rasped. I leaned in. "I am here, Dad." He pulled me closer, until his lips were inches from my ear. "That day," he whispered, the words coming out in a jagged, broken rhythm. "I took away the box containing the shame. I thought burying it was enough." A chill ran down my spine. "It wasn't enough," he wheezed. "I buried the wrong thing. I should have buried her." He let go of my hand. He slumped back in his chair, exhausted by the effort. I stood up, my heart pounding in my throat. He hadn't taken the box to save the money. He hadn't taken it to save the house. He had taken it because it was the physical manifestation of his failure. He couldn't face me, so he took the record of his sin and hid it in the wall, hoping that if he couldn't see it, it wasn't real. "We are leaving," Camilla said, touching my arm gently. I looked at my father one last time. "I will come back for you, Dad, I promise." We walked out of the study, past the kitchen where Marissa was sitting at the table with a deputy standing guard, and out into the rain. The storm was breaking. The sky to the west was turning a bruised purple. Henderson secured the evidence in his trunk. Camilla was already on the phone with the judge's clerk. "We have the motion," Camilla said, covering the microphone. "The judge is setting a consolidated hearing, everything at once, the will, the mortgage, the abuse allegations, 2 weeks from today." "The final battlefield," I said. "Marissa is going to fight," Camilla warned. "She is cornered. She has nothing left to lose." "Neither do I said, looking back at the house. I had the box. I had the truth. And for the first time in 15 years, I wasn't the one running away. The probate courtroom was packed to capacity. It seemed that word of the scandal in Maple Crest Hills had spread beyond the legal community and into the suburbs, drawing neighbors who had watched the decline of the Diaz house from behind their curtains for years. The air in the room was thick with anticipation, the kind of heavy electric silence that precedes a thunderstorm. I sat at the plaintiff's table, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. I looked at the gallery and saw faces I vaguely recognized from my childhood, people who had known my mother, people who had watched me grow up, and people who had watched my father fade away. Marissa sat across the aisle. She looked diminished. The confident, predatory energy she had worn like armor during the restraining order hearing was gone. She was hunched over, whispering frantically to her court-appointed defense attorney, a man who looked like he would rather be anywhere else on earth. Richard Diaz was positioned next to the witness stand in his wheelchair. He was slumped to the side, his good hand gripping the armrest, his eyes fixed on the floor. He looked like a ghost who had been summoned to haunt his own life. Judge Vance entered the room. The bailiff called for order. The gavel banged. A sharp, wooden report that signaled the beginning of the end. Camilla stood up. She didn't use notes. She walked to the center of the floor and addressed the judge with a voice that was calm, measured, and deadly. "Your Honor," Camilla began, "we are here today to adjudicate the validity of a will and the legality of a mortgage, but those are just the mechanics of this case. At its heart, this is not a dispute about assets. It is a question of cost. It is a question of who pays the price when a man chooses to carry a secret out of his house instead of protecting his child." She turned and pointed to the evidence table, where the gray metal lockbox sat under a plastic sheet. "For 15 years, Camilla continued, that box contained the truth. Today, we are going to open it." The presentation of evidence was a surgical dismantling of Marissa's life. First came the documents. Camilla called a forensic document examiner, a man with thick glasses and a monotone voice who projected the 2 wills onto the courtroom screens. "Exhibit A is the document submitted to the probate court in 2010, the expert explained, using a laser pointer to circle the signature. "Exhibit B is the document recovered from the lockbox 3 days ago. When we overlay the signatures, we see a mathematical impossibility in Exhibit A. The signature is a perfect pixel match to a medical release form. Mrs. Elaine Diaz signed in 2008. No human being signs their name exactly the same way twice. The probability of this occurring naturally is 0. Exhibit A is a digital forgery." A murmur went through the gallery. Marissa stared straight ahead, her jaw clenched tight. Next came the digital forensics expert. He testified about the metadata on the USB drive. He confirmed that the files were created 15 years ago and had not been altered, spliced, or manipulated in any way. He confirmed the authenticity of the timestamp on the hallway video and the audio recording from the study. Then it was time for the cross-examination. Camilla called Marissa to the stand. Marissa walked up slowly, her heels clicking on the floor. She looked cornered. "Mrs. Diaz," Camilla said, holding up a stack of bank records, You told the bank in 2010 that you were the sole beneficiary of the estate. Is that correct? My husband was, Marissa corrected, her voice thin. I was just handling the paperwork. You told the nurses at Cedar Ridge Rehabilitation Center that you controlled all of your husband's finances because he was incompetent, Camilla said, picking up a second document. Yet you testified in your deposition yesterday that Richard made all the investment decisions that led to the foreclosure. Which is it, Mrs. Diaz? Is he the mastermind, or is he the invalid? I was trying to protect him, Marissa stammered. The finances were complicated. Let's talk about protection, Camilla said. Please play Exhibit C. The screens flickered. The audio from the USB drive filled the courtroom. My father's voice, strong and clear from 15 years ago, echoed off the walls. I signed it. I didn't read it. I just wanted the fighting to stop. Then the video of Marissa ripping up the papers. You think your mother's name protects you? She is dead. This is my house now. Marissa flinched as if she had been slapped. You heard the recording, Camilla said. You heard yourself destroying legal documents. You heard yourself coercing your husband. Do you deny it? He was weak, Marissa shouted, standing up in the witness box. He couldn't handle the house. He couldn't handle the bills. I did what I had to do to save us. You did what you had to do to steal $450,000 in equity, Camilla shot back. And when the money ran out, you tried to bury the evidence. I took care of him, Marissa screamed, tears of rage streaming down her face. I gave him 15 years of my life. No further questions, Camilla said, turning her back on her. Marissa stood there, panting, looking around the room for an ally. She found none. The silence from the gallery was absolute condemnation. Then, they called Richard Diaz. The bailiff helped maneuver the wheelchair to the space in front of the judge. My father looked small, but when he raised his head, his eyes were clear. Mr. Diaz, Judge Vance asked gently, do you understand where you are? Yes, Richard rasped. His voice was damaged by the stroke, slurred on the left side, but intelligible. Mr. Diaz, did you know that the will submitted to probate was a forgery? Camilla asked. Yes, Richard said. Why did you allow it? Fear, Richard said. He looked at Marissa, who was sitting at the defense table, her face buried in her hands. I was afraid of being alone. I was afraid of her anger. Mr. Diaz, Camilla asked softly, on October 14th, 2009, you witnessed an altercation in your hallway. Can you tell the court what you did? Richard closed his eyes. A single tear leaked out and tracked through the stubble on his cheek. I walked in, he whispered. I saw Marissa hitting Phoebe. I saw my daughter on the floor. And what did you do? I turned away, Richard said. The words hung in the air, heavy with shame. I went to the console table. I took the lockbox, and I walked out the door. Why? Camilla asked. Why did you take the box instead of helping your daughter? Richard took a deep, rattling breath. He looked at me then. He looked right into my eyes, spanning the distance of 15 years and 1,000 miles of regret. Because the box held the proof of what I had done, he said, his voice cracking. It held the real will. It held the truth. I thought if I took it, if I locked it away, it would make everything less real. I thought if I hid the box, I could hide the sin. He sobbed, a harsh, choking sound. I carried my guilt in that box for 15 years. He wept. I was a coward. I sacrificed my child to save my conscience, and in the end, I lost both. The courtroom was silent. Even the court reporter had stopped typing. Judge Vance removed her glasses. She looked at Richard with a mixture of pity and severity. Then she looked at Marissa. Stand up, Mrs. Diaz, the judge commanded. Marissa stood up. She was trembling violently. I have heard enough, Judge Vance said. The evidence is overwhelming. The testimony is consistent, and the fraud is blatant. The judge picked up her pen. I am ruling that the document submitted as the last will and testament of Elaine Diaz in 2010 is a forgery and is void ab initio. invalid from the beginning, the original will, retrieved from the lockbox, is hereby admitted to probate. Under the terms of that will, the property at Maplecrest Hills belongs solely to Phoebe Diaz. I let out a breath, my head bowing forward. It was done. The house was mine. Furthermore, the judge continued, her voice hardening, because the deed transfer to Richard Diaz was based on a fraudulent instrument, the mortgage obtained by Northline Community Bank is invalid as a lien against the property. The bank will have to seek restitution from the parties who committed the fraud. She looked at Marissa. Mrs. Diaz, I am referring this matter to the district attorney's office with a recommendation that you be charged with forgery, grand larceny, and elder abuse, effective immediately. You are stripped of all power of attorney regarding Richard Diaz. You are ordered to vacate the residence at Maplecrest Hills by 5 o'clock this afternoon. You are to take only your clothing and personal effects. The gavel banged. Marissa collapsed into her chair, sobbing hysterically. But it wasn't the cry of a victim. It was the cry of a thief who had finally been caught. The courtroom erupted into noise. People were standing, talking, moving toward the exits. I didn't move. I watched the bailiffs approach Marissa. I watched them escort her out a side door. She didn't look back. I walked over to my father. He was wiping his eyes with a handkerchief. I am sorry, Phoebe, he whispered. I am so sorry. I know. Dad, I said. I placed a hand on his shoulder. It wasn't forgiveness. Not completely, but it was a start. We will get you to a good facility, one where you are safe. I turned to leave the courtroom. Outside in the hallway, Ethan was waiting. He was leaning against the wall, looking like a man expecting a firing squad. When he saw me, he straightened up. So, he said, his voice tight, she is gone. She is gone, I said. And the house is yours. Yes. Ethan nodded slowly. I guess I should pack my stuff. I can be out by tonight. He looked defeated. He looked like a kid who had inherited nothing but a legacy of damage. Ethan, I said. He looked up. I meant what I said at the diner. I told him. I am going to sell the house. I can't live there. There are too many ghosts. When it sells, I am going to take the proceeds. I will pay for Dad's care for the rest of his life, and whatever is left, I am going to split the remainder with you. His mouth fell open. Phoebe, you don't have to do that. I helped her. I signed those papers. You survived her, I corrected, just like I did, but there is a condition. Anything, he said. You cut her off, I said. No money, no contact. If she calls you from jail, you don't answer. If she asks for bail, you don't give it. You take this money and you start a life that has nothing to do with Marissa Diaz. You break the cycle. Ethan stared at me for a long moment. Then, he nodded. Tears welled in his eyes. Deal, he whispered. Good, I said. Now go home and pack. We have a lot of work to do. 2 hours later, I stood in the foyer of the house at Maplecrest Hills. It was silent. Marissa was gone. The deputies had escorted her out an hour ago. The house felt different. The air was still, but it wasn't heavy anymore. The oppression that had hung over these stone walls for 15 years had lifted, carried away by the storm and the gavel. I walked through the rooms. I walked past the kitchen where I had been accused of being a leech. I walked past the dining room where Marissa had erased my mother's pictures. I walked down the hallway. I stopped at the spot where it had happened. I looked at the wainscoting. I looked at the floor where I had fallen. I didn't feel the pain anymore. I didn't feel the phantom blow of her hand. I just felt a quiet, resolute peace. I walked into the study. The wall safe was still open, gaping like a wound that had finally been cleaned. I reached in and took the gray lockbox. It was light now. The evidence was gone. The secrets were out. It was just a metal box. I carried it to the front door. I opened the heavy oak door and stepped out onto the porch. The rain had stopped. The sun was breaking through the clouds, casting long, golden shadows across the lawn. I stood there for a moment, breathing in the smell of wet earth and freedom. 15 years ago, My father had walked out this door carrying this box to hide the truth. Today, I was walking out with it to set the truth free. I walked down the steps. I didn't look back at the castle. It was just a pile of stones now. My mother's legacy wasn't the building. It was the fight she had put in me. It was the refusal to let the lie win. I walked to my car, placed the empty box on the passenger seat, and got in. The engine started with a purr as I drove away, leaving Maple Crest Hills behind me for the last time. I watched the house disappear in the rearview mirror. The debt was paid, the secret was out, and for the first time in my life, the road ahead was entirely my own. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Please comment below and let me know where you are tuning in from. I would love to connect with you and hear your thoughts on how this ended. Don't forget to subscribe to the Lila Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and smash that hype button so more people can hear the truth and find their own justice.